hospitable, cozy, and a cozy personality. We take great pride in the collaborative, supportive, inspiring community that has developed over the last 65 years. So tonight, we celebrate the past and look forward to a bright future and continue to work to make Half Moon Bay the best place to live, work, and play. Vivir, trabajar, y jugar. Today, we also like to do we have a proclamation. June is Pride Month. This shows what Half Moon Bay, moving forward, being an inclusive community. June is LGBTQIA Pride Month, and it's a time when everyone joins together with their lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual community members in the spirit of solidarity and embracing diversity. During Pride Month, we reflect on the progress we have made as a nation in the fight of justice, inclusion, and equality for all, while reaffirming our commitment to more support the LGBTQIA rights. This month, we honor the strength and resilience of LGBTQIA people who have fought and continue the fight to live authentically and freely. We reaffirm our belief in the LGBTQIA rights are human rights. Despite extraordinary progress, LGBTQIA Americans still face discrimination simply for being who they are. This discrimination is disgraceful, and we all must play a role in the struggle for dignity and equality for LGBTQIA community members. The City of Half Moon Bay continues to stand with the LGBTQIA community in the struggle to ensure equal treatment for all, and to advocate for the LGBTQIA rights is a human right. Thank you, Coast Pride organization, for the important work and contribution to not just the City of Half Moon Bay, but to the entire coastside. Let us continue to make Half Moon Bay a welcoming place for everyone. With that, I have something for you. Hold on, I'll get to that. I'll come to you. Give me a chance. Hello. It is an honor from the City of Half Moon Bay to present this proclamation to Cameron. You're a board member or staff? Staff for the Coast Pride organization here in Half Moon Bay. City of Half Moon Bay has made great progress, becoming inclusive of everybody in our community, in a welcome community. And this is just a statement, that we have moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you for the proclamation. I just wanted to say thank you to several people from the City Council and the city. Let me just pull up my notes to make sure I don't miss anyone. So this year was our second ever public Pride Parade and Festival in Half Moon Bay, and that would not be possible without the support of the city. Julissa helped made it happen for the first time last year, and then Eddie from the city was also involved this year. And we had some vandalism incidences at the Pride Center earlier this year, and I just really want to shout out Karen and Irma. I don't see Karen, but Irma is here. Oh, Karen, hi. Sorry. After the vandalism incidences happened that day, I was at the center by myself, and Karen and Irma came and helped me clean up the glass from the broken window and brought flowers and just like really lifted my spirits that day, and it meant a lot that you all showed up for me, so thank you. Yeah, and yes. And then to open Pride Month this year, we had the flag raising on City Hall, and I got to meet Maggie for the first time, and Crystalline from the Chamber spoke, which was awesome, and Debbie Ruddick was there. Thank you for celebrating with us. I think I made sure I said everyone's name. Thank you. But I genuinely, like, not just about saying names, but genuinely really appreciate the city and the city council and city staff and the chamber for standing with Coast Pride this year, but also for the 5 years that we've been around on the coast side. And I know that also the CSFA grant program is happening again, thanks to the city council. And that's been super important for us to be able to build relationships with the other nonprofits on the coast side. And the dedication to continuing to build intersectional community amongst our nonprofits and our community serving agencies has felt really good. So thank you all for your work in upholding that. And I would be remiss if I don't thank our sponsors for Half Moon Bay Pride, so I'm just going to run through the list really quick. Sam Trans, Ritz, Carol Gazal, Republic Services, Sam's Chowder House, Oddfellows, Phil's Tires, Jetty Wave, Vargas & Vargas Construction, Costa Noa, Botus Construction, Goldworks, Catch Pelagic, Spanglers, and M-Start Galleries are also community businesses that stand with Coast Pride too. So thank you all so much, and happy Pride Month.
We continue to have a presentation, Juneteenth acknowledgement.
Good evening, Mayor Jimenez, council members, and community. I am here to present an acknowledgement for Juneteenth. This is just to honor and recognize what Juneteenth celebrates. Juneteenth is the most recent and significant national holiday that holds deep historical knowledge and significance for African Americans in the United States. It commemorates the emancipation of enslaved African Americans and marks a pivotal moment in American history. It wasn't until June 19, 1865, more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was made effective to free enslaved people, that the Union troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, to free 250,000 people still held in bondage. It symbolizes freedom, resilience, and the enduring pursuit of equality for African Americans. Although Juneteenth is recognized as the oldest known celebration at the end of slavery in the United States among African Americans, the historical events and significance this holiday have gained more traction among the larger population in the last few years. Therefore, the need to elevate this holiday, to learn about its history, and join African Americans in the celebration of what has become to be known as the second Independence Day in our country. The city of Half Moon Bay acknowledges Juneteenth Day as a testament to its commitment to diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. By acknowledging and celebrating Juneteenth, the city aims for the community to understand the resilience and contributions of African Americans while fostering a sense of unity, understanding, and mutual respect among its residents. The commemoration of Juneteenth in the city of Half Moon Bay is a way of honoring the journey towards freedom, and it stands as a reminder of the ongoing work needed to promote racial justice in our society. This is just the first step the city staff is taking to acknowledge Juneteenth, and we hope to continue this celebration and tradition for many more years to come. Thank you.
How's city staff doing?
We have a presentation by the Mid-Coast Community Council. An update.
I just want to, my name is Scott Bollinger, and I'm a member of the Mid-Coast Community Council, and I just want to thank your council and the city of Half Moon Bay for having me over and letting you know what we're doing over in the Mid-Coast. Our territory is from Miramar to Montero. That's where the unincorporated version, incorporated portion of Half Moon Bay is located. The first thing I want to mention that we're looking at is the Moss Beach Fire Station remodel. And we've written letters of concerns regarding the impact to the community on the fire station. The second thing I want to mention is the Cypress Point Affordable Housing Project. And we've been involved in reviewing and trying to mitigate the impact of that on the community. And so when you think about Moss Beach and the fire station remodel and realizing that those are both happening at the same time, it's probably going to put the infrastructure of that little neighborhood in Moss Beach under a lot of stress. So we're really concerned about the compound effect of both of those projects going on at the same time. We've also reviewed the neg deck for the Burnham Strip/Park that's under review. And so also there's another kind of a synergistic effect of two things happening at the same time. So they're also going to remove the parking along the east side northbound section of 1 right there where people usually park to go to Surfers Beach. And they're also going to remove some parking in the development of the Burnham Park. So we're concerned that that may drive a lot of the parking up into the neighborhoods. So we're a little concerned about that. Another thing that's happening in the Mid-Coast is all the logs from the down trees in Quarry Park are being incinerated in Murata East. So they have 3 curtain incinerators there that are going all day long during the week to get rid of all the downed trees. It's something to be concerned about, but I don't believe it's having a great impact in our community. And lastly, we've tried to tighten up our methods of communication to meet the guidelines described in the Brown Act. And again, thank you for having me over. And if you have any questions, I can answer them if you want.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? No? Thank you. We move on to our mayor's announcements. You see, there's a lot of activities that are going to be happening this summer. So I know there's the 4th of July event, July 4th. Also, at the end of the month, July 27th, the Oaxacan community have their celebration here in Half Moon Bay. It's July 27th, Saturday. I believe it's from 10 in the morning to 10 at night, I believe. It's a big celebration. Also, for those of you who are involved with the equestrian community here in the coast, there's an event happening August 10th. It's the Vaquero Days, Day of the Horse here in the coast. So we're expecting to have a lot of horses in the coast and live music and for the whole community. So just looking forward to those events. And August 3rd, we have a resource fair event, an open house at the Opportunity Center of the Coast Side, the OCC. Come by and visit Chamber of Commerce, the Renaissance, Coast Adventures, and Job Train. So that's August 3rd, and that's going to be from 11 to 4 o'clock. Thank you. So come by. It's downtown Main Street. It's 637 Main Street, right across Bank of America. Come and visit the OCC. And one more announcement. hold on. For my family and I, we would like to thank all of you who have supported us through this tragic event about the passing of my son, Joaquin. There's been a lot of support from everybody. You know, it hasn't stopped, and we greatly appreciate that. So, thank you, the City of Half Moon Bay, for everything they have done, our Sheriff's Department, for their support, for all the community that came together. And that's one thing that somebody said to me about, my son, bringing the community together. So it's been difficult, but I want to thank all of you who have supported us through this devastating tragedy. So thank you.
Joaquin, the entire city council is entirely behind you, and we support you in any way that we can. I understand how traumatic it must be, so believe me, we are on your side, so take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Harvey. Move on to reports for any closed sessions, recent closed sessions.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and our hearts are with you, Mayor and community. The Council did meet in closed session last week on Tuesday, June 11th, to discuss two items. One was a matter of existing litigation, the case of Casamira versus California Coastal Commission, and the Council also discussed an item regarding threatened litigation regarding the 555 Kelly project. Nothing to report out of closed session. Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to city manager updates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I just have one additional event I wanted to announce to the community. It's been out there, but we just want to keep reminding folks. Tuesday, August 6th, which would normally be a city council night, but we traditionally cancel our first city council meeting of August each year so that we as a community can participate in National Night Out, which is a national program where we're encouraged to host block parties to bring community members together in their neighborhoods to get to know each other. And the original purpose is to connect with law enforcement and public safety officials, to have them come and meet the community members and get to know them and just build those connections. And it's become very, very popular here in Half Moon Bay. I think we do a great job hosting these parties. If you are interested in hosting a party in your neighborhood, you can go to our website, hmbcity.com, and right on the top banner, click on National Night Out, and you can sign up. We actually provide a gift card to help cover the costs of some of the food or decorations or whatever you want to do for your party. We'll help you with A-frames to do some road closures if you want to do the party out in the street. And we'll make sure that you get a fire truck or a police car, or if you're really lucky, some city staff come by and say hi and eat some of your delicious food. And the council will be out there as well. So it's a really wonderful event. I look forward to it every year, and I know that those that participate really enjoy it. So again, that's Tuesday, August 6th in the evening. And if you're interested in hosting a party, or if you just want to know if there's going to be a party in your neighborhood, you can reach out to us through our website. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember last year I was there at several parties. Please extend the invitation to the council members. We do like to party too. Good food. We now move on to a public forum. Rocio Avila.
Buenas noches a todos.
Good evening to all. I'm going to let her say everything and then I will read it in English.
Okay. Como campesina y organizadora de la comunidad, me he dado cuenta que la comunidad campesina que vive en el campo no se da cuenta de los programas y servicios que ofrece la ciudad. Están marginalizados, no tienen acceso a internet, no tienen la posibilidad de socializar. A veces no tienen ni señal de teléfono. Hay personas con problemas de salud que no se pueden movilizar. El proyecto de 555 Kelly es más que una casa, es un proyecto para integrar a la comunidad campesina al corazón de Half Moon Bay. Conozco gente con problemas de salud que viven en el campo y no tienen acceso a los servicios necesarios. Y el centro de recursos en el mismo lugar donde vivirán es esencial para su sobrevivencia. También conozco seniors, agricultores mayores que tienen niños de 5 años. El proyecto de 555 Kelly permite que los campesinos más necesitados puedan vivir dignamente. Gracias.
As a community organizer and also agricultural worker, I have realized that the agricultural community that lives in the fields, they don't realize about the programs and services that the city is offering. They are marginalized and they don't have access to internet. They don't have the possibility to socialize. Sometimes they don't even have a phone signal. There are people with health problems that cannot mobilize. The project of 555 Kelly is more than a house. It is a project to integrate the community, the workers, the agricultural community to the heart of Half Moon Bay. I know people with problems, health problems that live in the fields and they don't have access to the necessary services, and the center in the center of the resources in the center as well. The place where they live is essential for their survival. Also, I know seniors, agricultural workers that they are elder, that they have children, small children. Some of them with 55 years old, they have a child of 5 years old. And this project of 555 Kelly allows the agricultural workers that have more need, they could live with dignity. Thank you.
Gracias, Rocío.
We do have 2 speakers on Zoom. The first is Linda Goldstein.
Hi, I'm Linda Goldstein. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm for 555 Kelly. I can't believe that we have to fight for the rights for decent homes. I can't believe that people don't live in decent homes and work so hard for the community. Come on, it's a right. It's a decent right. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Next speaker is David Rakowski.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm actually Joanne Rakowski, but it's a shared Zoom account. And I'm a member of Coastside Faith in Action and want to make just a very brief comment also in support of the farm worker housing plan for 555 Kelly. And this is in advance of the hearing next week. I understand that there are numerous objections and specifically 3 appeals. And I can understand the concern underlying some of the objections. But to me, the overriding issue is the urgent need for more housing, especially for those of very low and extremely low income. And farm workers definitely fit into this camp. I believe it is essential that this project be approved and begin as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. No further speakers.
Thank you. Move on to the consent calendar. Can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'd like to remove items 1G and 1H for a brief discussion. But I'm happy to make a motion for approving the rest of those items.
1G and 1H.
Yes. I move that we approve the consent calendar, items 1A, waive reading of resolutions and ordinances, item 1B, janitorial maintenance services contract award, item 1C, professional services agreement with American Debris Box and Portables, item 1D, professional services agreement with Sharp Business Systems for a 4-year lease of multifunction printers, item 1E, agreement with Pacific Coast Television for public educational and governmental access television services, item 1F, community services financial assistance program, and item 1I, salary schedule for the International Union of Operating Engineers, Station Engineers, Local 39 AFL-CIO, represented management team members, confidential and non-represented employees.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Brownstone?
Yes.
Councilmember Reddick?
Yes.
Councilmember Penrose?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rohrbeck?
Yes.
Mayor Jimenez?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Do we want to start with a 1G and 1F? Yeah. So I think beach volleyball makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of interest in it, and we want to provide as much programming as possible. I just need to hear from staff about the thinking around coastal development permits. Like, it looked like a temporary one was issued instead of a permanent one, but you're getting ready to do a permanent one. Has the Planning Commission looked at the issue of CDPs for volleyball in this case, or other private uses of the beach?
Thank you. I'll let John Dowdy, who's leading this project, respond.
So over the last, basically as a pilot project, we have put the volleyball courts up during seasonal time when the waves and the everything let us put that out there, and we've done those with an exemption, CDP exemption. So we have all landed that it's time to formalize, as you've read, with a full CDP. And we at that point are hopeful, and certainly will bring the Planning Commission because they are the authority for that work. And we have had conversations with the Coastal Commission as well. So that has been discussed. They've been very supportive of a pilot project as we look at that. And so I'm not sure how much more to answer. Certainly the Commission, we're looking this fall to bring that forward, and we can have a conversation over some time before we reach the point of April, May, when we can install hopefully next year with a full CDP.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure that we were looking at the issue of CDPs, seriously. It is a private use. We know that there's been issues with the surf schools, like in Pacifica and things. So I just want to make sure that we have a process, that we're consulting with the commission, that the Planning Commission is going to have a shot at this.
So I would say this is a minor privatization, I would categorize. Now, we could argue what constitutes major, minor, I guess, and whatever in between.
These are open to the public. We've had a lot of interest. People have signed up. The QR code is working out really well. So these are available for the most part 7 days a week for the public. And these are intended generally and first and foremost to the public. And yes, we're expecting an interesting conversation about this, this issue as we look at the issue of the license agreements, I think, at some point. Coastal Commission did question a couple of years ago on the surf schools. They landed at a point that they were fine with that, and we can kind of work from there.
Okay, that's all. Didn't want to get in the way of it. And I would move that we.
Hold on, we actually have a public comment.
Oh, okay.
Mike Ferreira.
Good evening, council members. Mike Ferreira and, of course, Mayor Jimenez. The reason I wanted to speak to this is because I was left puzzled when I looked at the staff report. I didn't see a map, so I don't know where these things are. And it's kind of hard to form a judgment about the applicability or the propriety of having these permits if I don't even know where it is. That's just speaking as a member of the public. I do recall, and perhaps Councilmember Ruddick would remember, the to-do we had for a year over weddings on the beach. Okay, and the Coastal Commission's involvement in it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I was a little surprised that it was in such a minor category. Now, maybe there have been great conversations with the Coastal Commission about it, but just as a member of the public, I would like to say I would like to know more about it given the history of these things, particularly maps, so I can see whose beach it's on, or how many beaches it's on, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm looking forward to more information, which I'm sure will be coming forward when this goes to the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Any comments from council? No? I have a comment, actually. Just remember, a couple months back, we had a young lady that came to speak about requesting fire pits at the beach. I like the idea. I like the idea of fire pits at the beach, especially, this time of the year for, we have a lot of visitors, and we have to be able to actually have organized fire pits, control fire pits, where garbage gets picked up, nobody's in danger, no public safety, always thinking about that. So we need to, that's as a request for that, we need to look into it, make sure that we get the permits, maps, or where we to plan that, because I want this, to be successful. Beach volleyball, for me, is a plus. As we get more community involvement in that area, but having permits, having maps, having a schedule about what's happening at the beach, it's something that it would be good for the whole community to know and enjoy the beach. We're getting a lot of visitors, and we have a lot to offer, and just want to make sure that our safety is also a priority. Thank you.
I would move that we adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a license agreement with Red Rock Volleyball Club for use of the seasonal beach volleyball courts at Poplar Beach for private tournaments.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Brownstone?
Yes.
Councilmember Reddick?
Yes.
Councilmember Penrose?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rohrbeck?
Yes.
Mayor Jimenez?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
I would move that we adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a license agreement with HMB Beach Volleyball Club for use of the Poplar Beach for private practices and training for calendar year 2024.
Councilmember Brownstone?
Yes.
Councilmember Reddick?
Yes.
Councilmember Penrose?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rohrbach?
Yes.
Mayor Jimenez?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Ready? 3F?
Yeah, so we're going to go to our resolutions. We're going to go to item 3F.
Thank you, Mayor and Council and community. The item tonight before you is twofold. We are seeking direction on two potential ballot measures for the November 5th general municipal election. So I'll briefly give background and context on both. And then we have our consultant, Lucia Del Popo from FM3, who conducted polling on the sales tax, who will go over the polling results, and then we'll look forward to council discussion and any potential public comments. So first on the sales tax measure, it was early last year that we were informed by San Mateo County that our public safety and dispatch communications costs would increase, and that was by about 43% total. That coupled with lower than expected TOT, sales tax, and property tax left us with a structural deficit heading into this upcoming fiscal year. So staff began working on ways that we could decrease our costs and potentially increase revenues. An internal team was developed, and we met to come up with a variety of potential revenue enhancement measures. We met with the City Council Finance Subcommittee a few times. Ultimately, what the subcommittee recommended to the City Council was looking at either a parcel sales tax or an increase in our sales tax. After we conducted feasibility analyses, we realized that a sales tax would be more beneficial for the city as far as revenue and as far as ease of getting it passed on the ballot. Additionally, we did find out from our sales tax consultants that 40% roughly of our sales tax is paid by visitors, so it would have a lower impact on our residents than a parcel tax. So we conducted polling, and then now we are here tonight to present the results of that polling and then get council direction as to whether you would like us to return at our July 16th meeting with a resolution placing a sales tax measure on the ballot. And then separately, we are also here to get direction on a potential measure to amend Measure D. And so in January, City Council requested that we schedule an item to discuss possible amendments. Then in February, during our listening sessions, we heard from a number of members of the public who requested that Measure D be amended to allow for modification for development of ADUs. At our priority setting workshop in March, the City Council identified a ballot measure as a priority for the upcoming fiscal year. And then on March 19th, staff received direction from Council to prepare a ballot measure for the election, which would include exemptions of ADUs and deed-restricted affordable units, and would modify the boundaries of the downtown area to be consistent with the town center and the LUP. So as our next meeting is the meeting that placement of these measures would take place, we wanted to check in tonight and obtain direction from the City Council on both as to whether you would like us to return to place those measures on the ballot. So at this time, I would like to introduce Lucia to present the polling results for the sales tax. And then we'll be happy to take council questions after. Lucia?
Thanks so much, Jessica. So as Jessica noted, my name is Lucia Del Pupo. I'm a Senior Vice President with FM3 Research. And it's my pleasure to walk through the findings of our survey this evening. Overall, the findings did indicate that if the council does decide to proceed with a measure, it does appear likely to be viable. There are obviously some assumptions built in with that, including, a strong turnout for a presidential year and a lack of kind of community opposition or organized opposition. But we are seeing majority support for a proposed half-cent sales tax measure throughout the course of the survey. And I think, in a year where frankly, we're seeing a lot of negativity, a lot of communities feeling kind of more divided and more likely to reject measures. We actually saw an uptick in the perception that the community is headed in the right direction in Half Moon Bay, as well as I noted this majority support for this idea of a measure. So before I dive into those specific findings, let me just really quickly touch on some of the methodology. So this was a random sample survey. We spoke to 318 voters, so that means that it was about a 5.7% margin of error at the 95% confidence interval. The survey was available online and via phone. For the online survey, we reached out via email and text invitation to registered voters. For the phone call, we called registered voters via either their landline or cell phone. And the survey was conducted in English and in Spanish. And you'll see throughout we have some comparisons too as well over time. We've had the benefit of working with the city for a few years on different surveys and different issues. So we have some data points that show trends over time. And finally, this data is hot off the presses. The survey was in the field from May 22nd to June 2nd, so very recent data. So with that, let me jump into the some of the kind of issue context. And Jessica, can you all see my screen? Because I see you're also sharing the screen, so I just want to make sure I'm...
So the audience could not, but I just pulled it up and I'm going to switch slides as you do. So we're good now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure everything was going smoothly and everyone could see what I was referencing. So as I noted a moment ago, we asked folks about the direction of the city. This is a kind of very standard polling question that we ask in a lot of communities and has been asked by a lot of different polling firms for decades going back. And it's a really good benchmark to kind of assess the mood of the community. And as you can see here, we've been asking this question in Half Moon Bay since 2019. And overall, 45% of voters say the city is headed in the right direction, and 36% say it's on the wrong track. So we do see an improvement relative to 2022, when only 38% said things were headed in the right direction. And that difference is outside of the margin of error of the survey. I will note we're seeing a lot of, as I flagged earlier, kind of negative feelings, perception that things are on the wrong track throughout the state and in the Bay Area in individual communities. So the fact that this is actually improving and net positive is a really good indicator. We also asked about approval of city government overall, and 52% of voters indicated that they approved of the job being done by city government, while 37% disapproved. So there is a slight decline in this metric relative to prior years when it was in the 60% range. And with the city council, perceptions have remained really consistent. 50% approve of the job being done by the city council and 39% disapprove. And this is really comparable to 2022 and not too different than 2020 and 2019. We also asked about the perception of need for additional funding to provide the level of city services that residents need and want. And we did see a majority said there's at least some need, and 15% said there was a great need. So while half of voters see a need, there isn't a lot of urgency behind that. And it is really pretty comparable to where folks were 2 years ago. Well, we did ask about the perceptions of financial management, and here we saw 46% approving the job being done managing local tax dollars, 38% disapproving, and 16% unable to offer an opinion. And this one is also pretty comparable to 2 years ago. A little bit of shifting, but generally pretty consistent. We asked voters about a series of problems facing Half Moon Bay, or potential problems that could be facing the community. And we asked them to tell us if each of these was extremely serious, very serious, somewhat serious, or not a serious problem. You'll see on the rank there, they're on the right there, they're ranked by the percentage who said each of these was an extremely or very serious problem.
Oh my God.
At the very top was traffic congestion, with 65% saying this was very consistent. 63% said coastal erosion was very serious. 61% said the cost of housing. 59% said the cost of living. 56% said potholes and street repair. And the majority also said inflation, a lack of evacuation routes, and homeless. On the next slide here, you'll see the items that fewer than half said were very serious problems. So about 2 in 5 said waste and inefficiency in city government. The amount they pay in local taxes was 38% very serious. Growth and development was very serious to 35%. Cuts to city services, very serious to 34%. Crime was very serious to 33% of voters. 911 emergency response times and the conditions of parks and open space were very serious to 32%, and drought to 29%. So then getting into the measure. So in the survey, we tested a version of the measure that is a 75-word version that could appear on the ballot. In the survey, we want to test a really realistic version of the language that could match what voters see on the ballot, because it's the one piece of information we know that every voter has before they make their decision. So we want to get a realistic read on where voters stand in the community on this issue. So this measure has a 50+1 threshold for passage. So it's a general purpose measure and a half-cent sales tax. And you'll see on this slide that 63% of voters said they would back the proposed sales tax measure, and 33% opposed it. 34% were a definite yes, and 23% were a definite no. I will say, so then when you factor in that 5.5% margin of error, or 5.7%, there is that the support is outside of the margin of error of the 50+1 level, essentially. We had asked about a half-cent sales tax at various points when we had surveyed for the city on a number of issues, whether it was a TOT or a vacant parcel tax. We had always asked about the half-cent sales tax also. And it's worth noting that this is the strongest result we've seen over time. It was in the similar range in 2022 and 2019, but definitely the most positive finding was this year, and support is at the highest point at this point. When voters told us they would vote yes on the measure, we asked them to tell us in a few words of their own why they would vote yes. And we then read their comments, aggregated them, and coded them out thematically. So folks could reference multiple themes. So this slide and the next one may add up to more than 100, but you can kind of get a sense of where folks were, what was motivating them and what they were saying. And for the large part, it was just this idea that, you know, these essential services that the measure funds are needed and important. There was also a sense that, you know, it's good for the community. The city needs the funding. 1 in 10 mentioned public safety. 1 in 10 said it was reasonable. Another 1 in 10 mentioned that it was a small price to pay. And then to a lesser extent, we saw folks telling us they wanted more information. They liked the public safety aspect, infrastructure, and affordable housing. We did the same exercise with those who said they opposed the measure. And the most common things people mentioned was anti-tax sentiment, so taxes being really high, or concerns about budget and mismanagement. I will say for most communities, when we do a revenue measure survey and we do this type of question, those are the two most common things that folks raise as reasons that they would vote no on a measure. To a lesser extent, we see some other comments about cost of living, city council accountability, or kind of other factors. We also asked voters about a series of projects and programs that, if additional funds were made available, could be funded, and we asked them how important each of these were to understand what are the things that the community is prioritizing. So for each of these, we asked them if they felt like it was extremely important, very important, somewhat important, or not too important, and they're ranked on the right there by the percentage who said each of these was extremely or very important. So everything on this slide, 74% or more voters said it was very important. At the very top, maintaining the city's financial stability was top priority for voters, with 81% saying it was extremely or very important. Maintaining 911 emergency response times was very important to 79%. Safe routes to school was very important to 76%. Maintaining crime prevention was very important to another 76%, as well as maintaining streets and roads. That was very important to 76%. Requiring that the funds be used locally, so that accountability provision, was important to 75% of voters. Maintaining local sheriff patrols was very important to 75%. And protecting natural areas, beaches, and open spaces was very important to 74%. On the next slide here, you'll see the items that 2/3 or more said was very important. So again, keeping beaches, parks, and other public spaces healthy, safe, and clean was very important to 73% of voters and extremely important to 41%. Keeping local streets and roads safe for pedestrians and bicyclists was very important to 72%. 7 and 10 said it was very important to keep Half Moon Bay affordable for nurses, teachers, agricultural workers, and other essential workers. Maintaining youth and recreation programs was very important to 70%. And then 69% said maintaining police patrols and supporting local businesses was very important. As we continued on this list, we see another array of items that more than 3 and 5 to 2/3 said was very important. So these include upgrading storm drains, maintaining essential police equipment and police cars, providing emergency centers for shelter in a natural disaster, preventing cuts to mental health emergency response services, maintaining and making safety repairs to coastal trails, reducing the local traffic congestions, addressing homelessness, maintaining hiking, biking, and walking trails, and preparing for public health emergencies. And then on this slide, the final slide in this series, you see the items that it's kind of split. The top part, or the top 2/3, is kind of the items that a majority said was very important, but again, not as widely shared maybe as some of the items we just looked at, whether that was cleaning up homeless encampments, preparing for earthquakes, landslides, and other natural disasters, preventing reductions in city services, funding programs that make housing more affordable, addressing illegal dumping, and providing mental health emergency response services, as well as providing services for people experiencing homelessness. So some of these, right, like the mental health emergency response and support services that we just saw a moment ago, voters were saw it as more important to prevent cuts than as to provide. So sometimes it was just how it was framed changed how voters reacted. And then we did see that 2 items, fewer than half said was very important. And these were rental assistance for low-income residents and landscaping on street medians. So over the course of the survey, we asked voters how they would vote on this measure at 3 different points. We asked them their initial support. We provided a series of educational statements in favor of it, positive statements, asked them again, and then we did the same. We said things that opponents might say and express about it. And what we saw is a remarkable consistency. 63% of voters initially said they would vote yes. 66% said they would vote yes after they heard the positive statements, and then 63% said the same after negative statements. So majority consistently said they would vote yes on the measure every time we asked in the survey. We do see some of that definite yes kind of fluctuating a little bit. It went from 34% to 37% to 32%, but it does remain quite solid. So over the next few slides, I'll kind of walk you through some of the positive messages we tested and how they tested. And so on the left-hand side, there is a percentage who said each of these was very convincing. So at the very top is the local revenue control. So this is the idea that Half Moon Bay has one of the lowest sales taxes in the county, but 100% of the funds raised by this measure would actually stay in Half Moon Bay. 37% said it was very convincing argument when we explained how if the measure doesn't pass, the city's annual deficit is going to grow. 1/3 talked about the importance of protecting and retaining public safety in the face of a natural disaster. 1/3 found it was to be very convincing, the fact that another kind of framing of this idea that Half Moon Bay has the lowest sales tax in the county, but if this measure doesn't pass, the money could be raised and go to other communities or the county. Then as we go further down the list here, you see messages that were overall, we'll see in a moment, majority convincing if we look at the very somewhat, but maybe a little bit less intense. And this relates to accountability, the fact that visitors are going to pay a large portion of this because they make up 40% of the sales tax revenue. The way this would affect affordability, the benefits to storm drains, and the investments in youth programs and youth resources. And then on this slide, you see a continuation of these messages that, again, had a little bit less intensity around them, whether it was parks, the fact that the tourist and visitor industry and sales tax revenue has declined, creating a need to raise the sales tax. emergency preparedness services and funding for those, and storm drains. And so as you can see here, a majority of voters found all of these overall convincing, between very and somewhat, but those that evoked the most consistency focused on that local revenue control and really preventing cuts. And as I noted earlier, we did the same exercise with the opposition messages. So these on the whole actually resonated less strongly. As you can see there on the left-hand side, the one that kind of was most convincing was this idea that it's, a general fund. So ultimately, the city can decide to do what they would like with them funds, that there's no sunset. Other messages related to waste, high taxes, high cost of living, that sales taxes are regressive, and that this could hurt businesses in the middle of a downturn. As you can see here, most of these, a majority said was convincing overall, but they were weaker and less impactful than the favorable messages on the whole. So the main takeaways here are that essentially the measure does appear viable at this point in time. As I looked at a few moments ago, the support is higher than it has been in prior surveys for a half-cent sales tax. We did see a majority of voters consistently supporting the measure, and it did cut across many of the major demographic groups in the city. Voters expressed the highest priority on maintaining the city's financial stability, 911 emergency response times, safe routes to school, crime prevention, and road repairs. And as we just saw a moment ago, that emphasis on that local revenue control was really important to voters. And while in contrast, critical statements didn't really move voters or have a big impact. So there was that consistency as I flagged earlier. So the findings do indicate that at this point in time, it looks like if there is this traditional presidential election turnout that is very high, strong public education, and a lack of organized opposition, it does seem like the measure would be well positioned for November. So at this point, I'm happy to take any questions.
Do we have any clarifying questions from council? No. No questions. Thank you.
I just want to say I really appreciate the thoroughness of the work that was done on this. So thank you.
I have a public. Crystalline, would you like to speak on this right now? Yeah, but thank you.
Thank you, Crystalline, the Chief Executive Optimist of the Coastside Chamber. I just would like to report back to council that we also reached out to the business community about the possibility of a sales tax increase. And overall, they were not in favor, mainly because people consider the sales tax as a part of their overall sale, and because they're having to charge so much more now for the cost of goods to account for the other things that have been tacked on. This did not land on them favorably. They also did not like paid parking, just FYI. And then, should I only talk about this one, or can I talk about the ADU too?
Yes, for on this item for now, and then come back on the other one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Council?
Mayor Jimenez, I do have one hand raised on Zoom. Would you like me to ask them if they're?
Yes, please.
Okay. David, would you like to discuss the potential sales tax measure or the Measure D measure? If you could unmute yourself, there you go.
Yeah, okay. Measure D.
Okay, thanks. We'll call you back in a second.
Thank you.
Joanne, which one did you want to address?
It's my error. I forgot to lower my hand.
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Council, any comments?
No, I'd like to ask staff to prepare a resolution and associated ordinance for the July 16, 2024 meeting, placing a measure on the November 5, 2024 ballot, which would increase sales tax by 1/2 cent.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Brownstone?
Yes.
Councilmember Reddick?
Yes.
Councilmember Penrose?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Barback?
Yes.
Mayor Jimenez?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I make one more comment?
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Just one more comment. I do read Nextdoor sometimes, unfortunately, and I've noticed that in some of the postings on Nextdoor, some folks are saying, oh, we're going to do a parcel tax, a sales tax. There is no parcel tax being considered, period. So I just would like to make sure that that's understood by the public, that that's no longer on the table. And we're only considering the 1/2 cent sales tax. Thank you.
And if I could add one thing before we move on to the Measure D discussion, we also will be having a town hall on July 10th at 6 here in this room to provide information and answer any questions about the sales tax measure. So do come if you're interested. And we'll be plugging that on our channels as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Penrose?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that our messaging around this item is going to be incredibly important, despite what the polls showed, which were favorable. I think it has to be tied to the 43% increase in the sheriff's cost. That's exactly why we're in this situation right now. It's not a situation that's going to get better next year or the year after that or the year after that. It'll get worse. So if folks aren't willing to support it right now, then they're going to have to be looking at decreased sheriff's sheriffing. Can't think of the word right now. And I don't think that's anything anybody in our community wants, but it is an option. And it's one of the biggest expenses our city has. So I think it's incredibly important that we tie the two things together. Thanks.
We will. Thank you.
Brownstone?
Just to add to Councilmember Penrose's comments, you know, there might be some folks who are thinking, well, didn't you plan for that 43% increase? It actually quite took us by surprise, that amount of increase. And there's, you know, there's other reasons. There have been cuts from state budgets, which everyone might be very aware of, and tens of billions of dollars. That cascades down to the county, and those rates have been raised across the county. Among all cities are struggling with that, so we're not the only ones. So thank you for mentioning that, Councilmember Penrose.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other comments? Nope. No more comments?
So then now we should have the Measure D ballot measure discussion and get direction from council on that.
I wanted to move it up because of the interest of the people, both in the sales tax and Measure D. And I would like an explanation from staff about why this is before us tonight, when the Planning Commission earlier, you know, asked for more data to be brought back to them.
I'm happy to respond to that. And then John Dowdy, our Assistant City Manager, has been very involved, and I welcome any additional comments. Yes, as the background shared, we got direction from council to bring this forward. And as part of that process, we took it to the Planning Commission to get their feedback and kind of their recommendation for council. in their meeting last week, which is where this was discussed. There were lots of questions and comments from the commission, and they've asked us to bring it back to them, which we are in the preparations of gathering that data and bringing them information back. Given the opportunity we had to bring the sales tax measure before you tonight, all we wanted to do was just make sure we're still on the right track with you all. So I think there's a couple of options for you tonight. One would be to tell us that something's changed and you don't want us to continue down the path of exploring a Measure D ballot measure, in which case we wouldn't have to spend more staff time or planning commission time on those questions, or at least we could explore that in a more broad forum down the road. You could say that you remain interested and you want us to continue what we're doing with the Planning Commission and return on July 16th, knowing that you may or may not vote for it at that time to put it on the ballot. Or you may say you're still 100% behind it and you expect to put it on the ballot and definitely keep working with the Planning Commission. This was never intended to undermine the Planning Commission or short circuit them. It just, because we had the meeting scheduled tonight and this item on the agenda, we thought it was worth a quick check-in with you just to make sure this is something we want to continue with as we continue to work on it. Thank you.
Yeah, I am in favor of option 2. I trust the planning commissioner that I appointed to make good decisions on the behalf of our city. And so I would like the item to go back to planning as it's scheduled for the 25th, I believe, right now. And then we can look at the issue after they come back to us for a recommendation.
Nothing's changed with me. And at the March meeting, I was clearly opposed to modifying Measure D. I think Measure D has done wonderful work in keeping our city infrastructure well-served. If you listen to the Planning Commission meeting, there were lots of concerns that were expressed, some of which I completely agree with. We can satisfy our regional housing needs even if we don't change Measure D. I think, as I said before, if we exempted ADUs, the net result would be there are a lot more single-family homes that would be built. And I'm 100% in favor of affordable housing. I don't think Half Moon Bay needs more single-family homes, and certainly does not need any more housing developments, which would be a potential tragedy that could occur if these proposed amendments made its way through. So count me out. Thank you.
Thank you. For me, it's change. I'm, at our last meeting that we talked, we brought out this topic about Measure D. I was in favor, of actually exempt the ADUs from Measure D. As for same thing as the affordable housing, but now I have a better understanding of what the change or Measure D could do for how it can actually damage our community when it comes to affordable housing. So actually, I would like to get more, go back to the Planning Commission and get more information, look with more detail. In what I understand now is if we exempt, ADUs from Measure D, in the long run, we're gonna give opportunity to building more single-family homes that are not likely to be low income. And right now, our concern is about providing housing for low-income community. So maybe we can, send it back to the Planning Commission and have more information on this. And what we talked about developing Half Moon Bay, about the housing, in our community, we have enough time, to do about 60+ units per year that can actually easily be done the way we're moving forward. So I think we need more time to look into the amending the Measure D.
I'm going to reserve my comments until after I hear from any speakers. I have a few, but I'd like to hear from the public.
Yes.
Yeah, the public speakers, yeah.
So I have Crystalline.
Crystal Lynn from the Coastside Chamber. The Chamber does take a position on affordable housing, and anything that can be done to make it easier for affordable housing to come for our workforce is welcomed. However, we do agree that it needs to be done methodically and thoughtfully, and we are just very pro AD use. So if Measure D does hamper ADUs being built, we would like to encourage to find a way to make it a little bit easier for ADUs. I've told the story about my ADU. Our previous city manager, he and I were potentially going to box over that ADU if he couldn't find a house in time. I probably still owe him lunch for that. But there are many of us who need to work on the coast side or are moving to the coast side or are trying to get out of our parents' houses and so on and so forth, or have parents we need to take care of. And whole houses at this point are very much out of the reach of a lot of people, and ADUs is a way to make it a little bit easier for those of us not ready for the two-bedroom house, and there's not enough apartment buildings on the coast side. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Mike Ferreira.
Good evening again, Mayor Jimenez and City Council members. This is Mike Ferreira, Half Moon Bay. I attended the Planning Commission meeting, spoke, and I'm going to start by saying that after watching the meeting and reading the letter from the chair of the commission, I have to take my hat off to her, if I had a hat. She really put in some work and some study. That's quite a letter she sent, and it indicates significant knowledge of our ordinances and the LCP. And she actually had the closing remarks at the Planning Commission, which was to sum up how many units Measure D could produce every year, and how that could actually overrun our RHNA, that we could build more units than we're required to build, just with Measure D as it is. And I think it's good to have planning commissioners that are data-oriented, that want to really dig into things and not just throw stuff at the wall. I mean, they really pay attention, and I really do want to commend them. The difficulty that I think I heard the mayor talking about is that if you took affordable housing and ADUs out of the mix, that would mean the entirety of Measure D percentages every year would go to market rate housing. All 63 would be open and up for grabs. And that also was brought forward, not just by the mayor, but it was brought forward by the planning commissioners. And so I think that maybe that's a view that we need to take seriously when we think about this. I think the chair of the Planning Commission also brought forward the fact that there are areas we haven't been talking about that maybe we need a lot more study and work between the commission and staff, which is how to get closer to 100% of Measure Ds that are given that actually turn into permits that actually turn into houses. Because that's actually where where HCD is. They're only crediting us for houses. And so with all of that, I am hopeful that this would go back to the Planning Commission for more work, more data, and to bring you something with a fully developed recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. James Benjamin.
Thank you, and good evening, council members. It's very nice to see you again. I'm grateful, Mayor Jimenez, that you called me after Mike and after a reference to Chair Gossett's letter, because I can just say I support both of their positions and won't dwell on that more. When I talked to John Dowdy for a few minutes before the meeting, he pleaded with me to stay out of the weeds, which, as you know, is my natural habitat. But I'm pleased to see from the comments that I heard from the dais tonight that you are already in the weeds a little bit with me, so welcome. I appreciate that you see the unintended side effect of this proposal actually consuming more resources for the market rate housing. I also want to point out that the excess affordable housing that we would develop beyond our regional needs housing allocation, regional housing needs allocation, will not give us any credit in future cycles. So if we get a flood, and I'm not saying that we would, but if the storm gauge test opened and everybody said, let's do a thing and it's exempt, the next cycle, we don't get any credit for the excess. And that's a very dangerous position as a result of the way the measures are structured. So please consider the consequences, the unintended consequences that would result from this. The last point I want to make was one I mentioned in my letter to the Planning Commission, which I'm not sure is in your record today. I think it'll be coming forward eventually. But as you know, we have a variety of infrastructure constraints on the coast, and our ability to develop solutions for that, and I'm talking about geomorphology, not just storm drainage, our circulation element, other public safety items, really depend on our ability to make wise use of the resources of land and the money that would be associated with development fees. And if we move to consume those resources so quickly without having a clear understanding of what the dangers are and our ability to navigate as the state legal framework changes and our understanding of climate change changes and the way fires and drought, you could see in that survey that droughts aren't important. If we'd asked that question 5 years ago, I bet it would have been a lot more important. A few years ago, I was at the Coastal Commission meeting up in Princeton Harbor, where we were negotiating with the city was negotiating with the Coastal Commission about the balance between short-term rentals and our housing stock. So I know our city is capable, I'll wrap it up, I know the city is very capable of having an extended conversation and careful negotiation that allows us to balance our obligations to our community and all of the other elements of the general plan. With respect, I think this proposal is very focused on the housing element tail, and it tries to wag the general plan dog, and I think it's very unwise. I'm happy to discuss any of these things in more detail with you, and I'm grateful for the chance to see you and speak to you tonight. Thank you for considering my comments.
Thank you. Comments from council?
I have one Zoom speaker. David?
Hi there. Mayor Jimenez and Council. This is David Gorn. I am on the Planning Commission, but speaking as a citizen of Half Moon Bay. My comments are obviously not about Measure D, and they are not data-driven. But I have a hard time believing that this item is before the council. To me, there is no world, no reality where this is okay. So the council sent this item to the Planning Commission. The Commission continued it to the next meeting, and this item chooses to ignore that. So I read a staff report that justifies this item by citing the fact that 2 of the 5 commissioners disagreed with it. But 3 of the 5 commissioners did not. So does the staff report really say the community members have expressed dissatisfaction with Measure D? I would say there's a number of people who've also expressed satisfaction with it. I just don't understand how this could be twisted by lawyers to the point where it's somehow okay to bypass the Planning Commission. So to me, any explanation of this item is legal gobbledygook and indefensible. Thank you.
Thank you. Council?
Yeah, first order of business is I'm very concerned about this coming forward tonight when the Planning Commission asked for more data, more analysis to inform their decision. The City Council delegates our planning function to the Planning Commission. We're policymakers. The planning function belongs to the Planning Commission. We have very intelligent community members who sit on the Planning Commission and who are perfectly capable of evaluating data if the data is given to them. If the data is given to them that is the data that they asked for. So what I don't want to see, I don't want to see the Planning Commission hustled to make decisions that are convenient for others. And I watched the 5A5 Kelly Planning Commission meetings. I watched the most recent Planning Commission when they were considering this twice. And, I felt like the planning commissioners, weren't really being heard. There seemed to be this urgency, the city council wants to put this on the ballot, we have limited meetings left to consider this and get this on the ballot. We need to think about this ahead of time and schedule sufficient meetings for them to adequately consider these very critical decisions. I don't want to see our planning commission hustled. I don't want to see their role shrunken to make it convenient for the council, or staff. I want them to do their jobs. They're volunteering. They don't get any remuneration, like the minimal remuneration that we get. They're very hardworking. So, I want the council to continue to be, sensitive to their planning commission. I want staff to support them. And I was kind of concerned in our staff report tonight where there was a mention that staff was going to go out and get some more data to support the issue of putting Measure D on the ballot. I don't want them making that call. I want them to supply the information so that the Planning Commission can determine whether to support it or not to get the data to support an outcome that other people want. So, it's in our own code. We're a general law city. We delegate that function. We need to support it and not ignore it or curtail the consideration that they give these things. So that's why I wanted to move it up. I wanted to have us have a discussion of this, and I want this to go back to the Planning Commission. I'd like to see that analysis as well, what the impacts are of Measure D or, affordable housing. Deed-restricted affordable housing already gets density bonuses exempted, for instance. Affordable projects, 100% are tax exempt. So there's issues of, providing services and having adequate resources to provide services. So there are a lot of considerations. I think it's good that the city council initiated the discussion, but I want to hear the planning commission weigh in with, based on, adequate information. So my wish tonight is that we, keep it at the planning commission, have staff present the data they need, and then, bring it back to us. So that's where I am tonight.
Vice Mayor.
I only watched the meeting once, but I completely agree with you, Debbie. And it was more than just a request for data, which I can support, but it was clear that at least two of the planning commissioners were against the idea of changing Measure D. So that was consistent with my position, and I really think that we need to think very seriously before we put this on the ballot. So thank you.
Any other comments? No. I actually have even though I'm in favor of building ADUs, this is still a concern. What could happen, during the next cycle. So it's a concern. We hear from the community at our last meeting that we addressed this, how many people actually have benefited from, from build ADU in their property. We have that, but there's still that concern. So we do need more information, and I agree with you, that we are not ready to bring it, to the ballot. I think we do need more information, maybe a town hall for the community to actually understand, what is the benefit of having in ADUs, under Measure D, and what is the consequence, how it could affect, for the next cycle. We are in need of housing. We are, but ADU now I see it, it's more like a Band-Aid of what could happen, right now. In the city of Bay, we are moving forward about building housing for our community, especially a low-income community. There's projects, working right now that is going to benefit us. And I don't want to take that away, and in the future, when we're going to be needing this more housing for our community. So we do need more information, send it back to the Planning Commission, and if we can do, like a study session, a town hall with our community so that we can better understand, what this could do for us.
I just want to remind everybody, too, that, Measure D allows for, phasing plans for larger projects, for instance. Somebody brought that to my attention during the Planning Commission meeting. That's very important information. There's also tweaks that could be made to the beauty contest for assigning priorities and allocating Measure Ds. So I think that's got to be part of the analysis. I will say that I saw it was either a bill analysis on an existing bill in Sacramento this session, or it was an LAO report, I can't remember, but the HCD is about to get somewhat different marching orders going forward. So for their work plan next year, the work plan is to focus more on high usage transit corridors like, El Camino and that sort of thing, and also moving away from individual construction of units and looking at how else are we sheltering people. Maybe it's co-housing, maybe it's home sharing. So, the feeling in Sacramento is starting to shift somewhat. Our original plan for our sustainable, communities overarching plan for the state, focused on these high usage transit corridors. And we kind of moved away from that, let's just build it everywhere. And now, based on discussions in Sacramento, it seems to be starting to steer back to, original thinking on this, to avoid, greenhouse gas emissions was to put it where it already exists, right? And to consider not just individual units, but how else can we shelter people? Why should we be fixated on construction of a unit when maybe there's rehabbing units or home sharing or those sorts of things? So, we want to watch what's going on in Sacramento too, because I think it looks like it's starting to shift somewhat. based on, responses from cities and counties and things like that. So just my 2 cents there.
One more thing. We had talked about, the changing of the map, the downtown area. And we can also look into that, or what that new map will look like. I think will be a benefit to the community. And one thing, Mr. Ferrer brought up is some of the allocations, they don't even do a permit. So do they have a sunset, after how many, months or a year do they have to do a permit, to build? And what happens if they don't do a permit? So exactly. So we have to be actually look into it with more detail about, if there is an allocation given for an ADU and they don't do up and they don't, there's no permit for it. So looking into the map or the downtown area, and also, the permits for the allocated AD, for the ADUs.
And here's another reason why the map is important, because I'm guessing that some of the property owners who are under the current map, like north of Safeway Shopping Center, maybe, behind downtown, they may not have had proper, outreach about these map changes. They might be at a disadvantage under a new map. So I think the Planning Commission needs to look at the map issue, and I think probably there's got to be some outreach to those property owners who benefit now and who might not, under a change. That's kind of important. And it involves a lot of acreage of land that might be farmed now, but might not be in, more likely an urban reserve where it could convert at some future date, right? So I think there's a lot of unresolved issues. And it seemed like a good idea. I mean, and let's face it, it would be a way, I think, especially with the ADUs, to, keep in the HCD's good graces. So there are some political reasons to do certain things, but we have to understand the impacts before, we make a political decision like that, I think. So.
Councilmember Brownstone?
We've received all public comment at this point, right? Okay, so public comment's closed?
Correct.
Great. Well, first of all, I've always liked the idea of ADUs. And in terms of Measure D, I appreciate, I read the chairperson, the Planning Commission chair's letter. She's my appointee. Of course, I read her letter. And I appreciate Mike Farrar's comments that she does do her homework. And I thought it was very thoughtful. And it's a complex issue. So yeah, we're balancing a lot of interests. We always got to be careful. We throw out terms like affordable housing, but we've mentioned many times, there's different ranges, there's very low income, there's low income, workforce housing, teachers, other people who work here. Unfortunately, in this state, a teacher's salary is low income, and then we talk about deed restricted, we're talking about just a number of different issues, and it's complex, and HCD and the politics of it. And I trust that we do have a thoughtful chair of the Planning Commissions and Commission, other thoughtful commissioners who, I want this to go back to the Planning Commission. Always wanted it to be going back there for their advice around what some of the options and the impacts are. We do need more information. And before we make any rush about if and how we put a ballot initiative on to change Measure D. And the more Planning Commission has time to get all the input and explain things, and the more education that goes out to the community, which then informs us as well. So I think it's a great benefit that it goes back, and just like we do sometimes, we add a few extra meetings in if they need more time and information. So that's great. That's what I support.
It's okay to change your mind based on new information, right? It's okay to change your mind. I would direct everybody's attention to a Daily Journal article yesterday that, big headline, family of four making $169,000 a year is low income in San Mateo County. It's like, It's insane.
Any more comments? Oh, do you have direction?
I think direction's clear. You want us to continue to press forward, continue gathering that data and bring it back to the Planning Commission and provide them the information they need to make a recommendation. I want to clarify a couple things. One is, for this election, there are time constraints, so just to be aware of them, and Jessica can correct any of this, but August 8th is the deadline to adopt the resolution putting this on the ballot for November. We do not have the August 6th meeting because of the National Night Out. And so our last regular meeting after tonight is July 16th. I would ask, can a special meeting be used to, okay, so there is the opportunity if this needs additional work that we could schedule a special meeting for this item to be placed on the ballot closer to August 8th, and we're happy to do that. I will say, I answered the question from Councilmember Ruddock earlier. Now that I've heard some comments from you all and from one of our commissioners, I think I have a little better context of that question. So I just want to clarify, the intent of the question tonight was never about undermining or discrediting or trying to get around the Planning Commission. I got a sense that there was a feeling, at least from the commissioner and some of the comments I heard. So we had a check-in tonight on ballot measures, just a gut check, and we will press forward. I will publicly apologize to our planning commissioners if they felt like us putting it on the agenda tonight was disrespectful or geared towards trying to undermine their authority. As I shared at the beginning, we kind of had three options. None of them was to just jump straight to July 16th. All of the options included the Planning Commission, unless you as a council said, you know what, we've changed our minds, we don't want to pursue this any further. It's clear that you at least want to continue this exploration, so that'll continue through the Planning Commission, and we will not bring it back to you until after we've got a recommendation from them. So we appreciate the additional feedback tonight, and we'll let you know how that goes with the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you. How about a break? When I do come back, 5 minutes? Welcome back. Thank you for the break. We're going to move on to item 3A. Who's presenting? Irma?
Sorry, can you guys hear me okay? Good evening, Mayor, Council, and community. My name is Irma Costa, and I am an administrative analyst in the Economic and Community Vitality Division. And I am here today in continuation of the Hotel BID on the proposed assessment that I presented on May 21st, 24, sorry. So in compliance with California law, specifically California Government Code Section 54.6, we are to follow a certain procedure before adopting any new or increased general tax on an assessment. So in order to propose the increased assessment for this fiscal year, to move it from $1 to the $2, we are to hold a public meeting. So this is the purpose of this item being on the agenda today. So I'd like to open the forum for any public comment on the proposed assessment.
Do you have any questions from council? Comments?
I do have one
comment?
online speaker.
Yes, please.
Okay. Carlisle Ann Young, go ahead. You'll have to unmute.
Hi. Actually, I just wanted to let you know that all we can see on Zoom is a picture of Jessica. The meeting didn't switch back over to the meeting room.
Thank you for letting us know. We'll correct that right now.
Okay.
I believe there's no comments on it.
Yeah, no
Give
other
us a-
online speakers at this time, and we'll just work on our IT technical difficulties in the background.
Thank you. What do you need from us?
It's just a public meeting to allow for public comment on, I mailed notices to the affected properties to inform them about the public meeting, and yeah, so.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Going
Have
to
a good
$2. Yeah. Making money.
If I could just clarify, this is actually going to come back on July 16th for the protest hearing. This is a 3-step process. We normally have a 2-step process, but because of the proposed increase from $1 a night to $2 a night, we actually had to add a extra meeting. So that's the purpose of tonight, and you'll see this again on July 16th.
Stone Pine Cove.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Thank you, Mayor, council members. Tonight, we are seeking council's authorization to expend the $1.25 million and state funds that was allocated for purposes of support of Stone Pine Cove project. As indicated in the staff report, we have, a portion of that allocated for Coastside County Water District connections fees and then for plan check fees. And the remaining monies, we are requesting authorization for the city manager to be able to allocate that to other capital-related construction costs associated with the project. At this point, we have had conversations with the county, our co-applicant, and on this, and at this point, they have not identified exactly what they would like to utilize those funds for. We will continue to have those conversations, and by this fall, we anticipate all of the $1.25 million will be fully allocated and probably expended in project work. As this obviously exceeds the authority of the city manager, we're here requesting the council's authority and approval to do this expenditure. Thank you.
Do we have any public comment on it?
I believe we do. Carlisle Ann, is your hand raised this time?
Yes, this time I did want to speak. I was just wondering, I noticed you put in some money for Coastside County Water District. What about your sewer enterprise fund to hook up all of the mobile homes to sewer? I'm assuming they're going to be on sewer there, right? No?
Yes, please.
Sure. Thank you for that question, and Mr. Dowdy can speak in more detail. But the purpose of this item is to get authority to begin allocating the funding that we receive from the state towards the project. We specifically called out the water connections here because there's an urgent need to get those taken care of, which will allow additional work to happen out at the site. We haven't worked out with the county which portions of the project we would pay for out of these funds beyond the water connections. But certainly there will be sewer hookups and lots of other work that will happen under this project. And I think part of what getting the authority to use this funding does is it allows us to deal with some of these bigger issues that come up quickly and can be resolved fairly quickly. So it just makes the project more nimble going forward. John, do you want to respond to that question more specifically as well?
Only to say yes, the project connects to sanitary sewer, and yes, this project will be required to pay connection capacity fees to the sewer utility enterprise.
Thanks.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, John. We need a resolution, motion.
I move that we adopt a resolution allocating $1.25 million in city affordable housing funds originating from State of California Direct Grant to the Stone Pine Cove project at 880 Stone Pine Road, and 2, authorizing the city manager to expend the $1.25 million for project-related expenditures, including an initial payment of $487,000 to Coastside County Water District for priority water connections.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Brownstone?
Yes.
Councilmember Penrose?
Yes.
Councilmember Reddick?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Varbeck?
Yes.
And Mayor Jimenez?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We move on to item 3C.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This will be presented by our interim community development director, Steve McHarris. I did want to provide a little bit of context here. There are several contracts and agreements that the city executes on an annual basis, and there had been a practice historically of they were just very administrative and routine, and were just put on a consent item as a big kind of omnibus package before the budget each year, before the end of the fiscal year, so that those contracts would be in place for the following fiscal year. We got feedback last year that the council was uncomfortable with that practice, and we want to look at these contracts individually and have an opportunity for some discussion, and I think talk about, are we looking at efficiencies and performance measures and those types of things. And so this is part of that work this year, is to bring some of these larger contracts forward so that we can have a discussion about why they're important to city operations and the work that is performed under them. So with that, I'll turn the time over to Steve. He'll probably provide a short presentation. A lot of detail is in the staff report, but we're happy to answer questions as well. Steve, thank you.
Great, thank you. So good evening, Mayor Jimenez and members of the council. I am Steve McHarris. I'm your interim community development director. And this item is an annual renewal of 2 separate community development agreements. They are very efficient and effective. The first contract is with Four Leaf Incorporated for building and plan check and inspection services. and that's an amount not to exceed $250,000 over the year. The second is Metropolitan Planning Group. You also hear them referred to as M Group, for contract planning services in an amount not to exceed $141,250. These two contracts have been included in the recommended Community Development Department operating budget and the CIP budget for fiscal year 24-25. The 4-leaf contract covers 30 hours per week for building inspections, hours for mandatory building official position, hours for permit tech as a backup staff, and hours for plan check services. So primarily everything in the building division within the Community Development Department is under contract with the 4-leaf under my supervision. The plan check inspection fees or plan check inspection services are primarily covered by building permit fees paid by applicants. The second item, contract item, is the Metropolitan Planning Group. That contract covers 15 hours per week of a part-time planning analyst who you see quite often at the Planning Commission, supporting the Planning Commission. That position also supports the AAC, the Community Development Director hearings, and staff. We also have with the M Group GIS tech support, so the mapping that you see presented in many of the presentations, the support behind that is through the M Group staff with their technology expertise in the GIS area, which we do not have in-house. We also have planning staff hours for work on the housing element, which is a huge lift for the city. So although you've seen staff, city staff and house working on that, putting a tremendous amount of time into that, there's also been behind the scenes staff support from the M Group. And that's more important now than ever with one of our staff members kind of off the project, and now there's a greater role this year in that. Although I don't see that extending through the entire fiscal year, so the contract amount really isn't much different than last year. In fact, both those contracts are very similar. There's just a slight increase based on cost, but the hours are the same as last year for both services. So we do recommend the council adopt and authorize the city manager to execute both professional service agreements through the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, 2025. I'm here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Steve. And I'll just add one additional piece to this. The reason the city utilizes contract service providers for these functions is, as Steve described, they are not typically full-time functions, and they kind of happen based on demand, based on permits that are being submitted and projects come forward. And so we found this as a cost-effective way to manage those functions within the city, and both of them are not to exceed amounts, which means if we don't get the demand and we don't use the services, we don't have to pay for them. So this is the maximum we'd be asking for this year.
Thank you. Actually, that was going to be my question as well. You read my mind.
Yeah, you said something about the M Group analyst working 15 hours a week. Is the $141,250 to pay him to work 15 hours a week?
Well, 15 hours a week is on average, so there's be some weeks there's less hours and some weeks there'll be more, but to answer your question, that is included in that.
Yeah, 141,000 times 3 would be 45 hours a week, and that would be paying him $450,000 for an annual salary. It just seems like a lot of money to me.
Okay, so we can redo the math.
Maybe you can explain it.
Well, we're limited to the amount of money we're asking, so we would say, let's say on up to 15 hours a week.
Well, I think the question I heard was, is the funding included for M Group only paying for that part-time analyst position?
Yes.
And therefore, it sounds like a really high hourly rate.
Sounds like a lot.
It does.
No.
Yeah, it does not only cover that position. That position, the contract planner position, is paid at a competitive rate that we would pay an internal staff person. That funding covers other services as well from M Group, not just that one planner position.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I looked it over, and I think both look reasonable.
Any comments? No. Motion to adopt the resolution?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I move that we adopt resolutions authorizing the city manager to execute professional service agreements through June 30th, 2025, with one for Leaf Inc. for building plan check and inspection services in an amount not to exceed $365,250, and two, Metropolitan Planning Group for contract planning services in an amount not to exceed $141,250,000.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Brownstone,
Yes.
Councilmember Penrose,
Yes.
Councilmember Reddick,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rarback,
Yes.
and Mayor Jimenez.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Move on to item 3D.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be taking this item tonight. Tonight, we present to you the draft council priorities work plan for the upcoming fiscal year 24-25 and fiscal year 25-26. I'll provide pretty brief background. We have a well-honed-in process here that we've used the last several years, and it seems to be effective in working for both the council and the community. So we have a strategic plan. It includes very high-level strategic elements that really are the guiding light for all the work that we do. And then we annually go through a council priority setting process to identify the high-level priorities that council wants staff to focus energy, time, and resources towards beyond the day-to-day work that we do within City Hall and out in the community. And then the capital improvement plan is also part of that strategic plan. In fiscal year 24 through 26, based on the hearings that we've had with you, we retain the 5 council priorities that we've had the last several years, including affordable housing, public health, safety, and emergency prep, community climate resilience and sustainability, economic recovery and development, and transportation, circulation, and mobility. Now, that's the high-level priorities that are set through our work with you and the community. And then, of course, at your priority setting session and work session that was held in March, you also provided some specific projects that were important to you within these categories and other recommendations of what you'd like to see come back. So staff has worked on a pretty detailed work plan to cover the next 2 years. The work plan is aggressive, but developed with input from staff and our department heads, and we believe is a realistic expectation of the work that we can produce over the next couple of years, pending new items coming up that the council decides should take priority over these. I won't go through the whole work plan, although it is available if you'd like to look at it. It was attached to the agenda. But I just wanted to highlight 2 different categories. One of the categories are what we call mandated, non-discretionary type items. So either there's a law that says we have to do this and we have to do it now, or there's work that's in place, there's grant funding, there's contracts in place, or a project has reached a point where you don't turn back, you keep moving forward. And so some examples, of course, are the housing element, which is being completed now and will be the subject of some public hearings over the next couple of months, and we hope to submit for second review by Housing and Community Development later this year and be approved. And then there's follow-up work that needs to happen that we call the implementation of the housing element. Some of that is included in this current fiscal year's work plan for 24-25. A lot of it is pushed forward to 25-26. In the case of our city, the land use plan prevails. And so the zoning updates we can take our time with and be more methodical with and wait until we have more staff bandwidth to take that on. And that was a big topic of discussion at your priority setting session. We have several housing development projects in the pipeline, some under construction, some under consideration, as you know. This isn't to say that those projects have to be completed, but there's work happening that needs to continue forward, and decisions need to be made at the council level. Support for renters, this is really talking about the rental registry, rent control, renter protection measures, and a forthcoming ordinance to provide support for evictions. The Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, the Climate Action Plan was adopted last year, and we are working towards adoption of the Climate Adaptation Plan. There's been a lot of work and grant funding extended towards this, and this makes us eligible for additional grants under a high priority area for you. And so we consider this really a non-discretionary project. And so on and so forth. I'm happy to answer questions about any of the other projects on this list. And then under discretionary, again, I'm not putting a judgment on how important something is, but we have more flexibility from a policy standpoint at the council level, whether or not we want to pursue these things. The Measure D modifications about measure that we talked about tonight, the work that is happening around the age-friendly initiative, and especially around healthcare access, mental health support. That really the highest level thing there is the CARES program. And I just want to remind you that the feedback we've gotten is that when the grant funding, which is fully funding the program right now, runs out at the end of March, if we have not identified an additional funding source, that at this point, additional general funds will not be granted towards that, and that program will have to wind down. And so between now and then, we'll be focused on trying to identify additional grant funding to keep that program going. Work on the minimum wage. There was work happening last year. There's been some research done, and our city attorney's office has developed some additional policy options, so we'll be bringing that forward shortly for additional discussion. And the ALPR, Automated License Plate Reader Pilot Program, which we discussed a few months ago, we are working on the policy. There was a delay on that because of the changeover in our sheriff's captain, as you're aware of. We did get feedback from the ACLU today, which was really timely as we get a new captain on board that we'll work with to bring back the draft program and policies for you to make a final policy decision if we're going to move forward with this pilot in the coming fiscal year. And again, the rest of the list, there's similar descriptions I can provide if you have questions. And again, we can go into the detailed work plan if you so choose. So our recommendation is, again, that we believe this is a work plan that is realistic and manageable by our current staff and resources. It's aggressive and flexible, and of course, depending on new needs and issues that come up over the next 2 years, it's subject to modification by you all with our recommendations. And I'm happy to take questions on any of the projects or work plan items at this time.
Questions?
So I'm looking at Parks and Recreation. And 7A says, survey existing users and potential users about current and desired parks and rec offerings. Are you talking about updating the Parks Master Plan?
No, and I'll invite John Dowdy if you'd like to get up and speak a little bit more, as he's been working with the Recreation Commission on this. But this is something the Recreation Commission has been discussing as something they would want to move forward at some point for several years, and it feels like the right year to do this. The Parks Master Plan was very, very focused on facilities. So it's looking at our current parks inventory and opportunities to improve those properties, as well as other places we should be focusing on developing new park facilities. I think what this is referencing, and John can correct me if things have changed, is this is really looking at our programs, the services offered out of the Ted Adcock Community Center, the offerings we have at the Boys and Girls Club and different fields within the community, and really just getting a sense of what are we missing and what should we be actively pursuing, and what programs maybe have run their course and we're ready to look at something different. John, is there any other detail that we want to share on that?
Again, this is about primarily recreation programming. Now, for full disclosure, the commission itself has indicated an interest at some point getting programmed in funding and to look at updating potentially the Parks Master Plan. And I think in that we could also look at that now that we're in a better position to look at it in the context of Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and we could integrate both of those in. Because of our budgetary constraints and staffing constraints, the commission understood that we were not going to immediately be able to pursue that in this fiscal year, and I think we can come back and visit next fiscal year with that idea of expansion. So we're looking at trying to feed and build that information. So if we choose to look at that update and include recreation, we can do so in year 2.
Okay, so one of the things that's missing under Parks and Recreation, and the council was unanimous during its priority setting meeting, that we look at the community garden at Magnolia Park, and I don't see Magnolia Park.
I'll just say Magnolia Park is in the capital improvement program. It's moving forward. The CDP process is moving forward, so that's taken care of. So that doesn't, from a staff perspective, that doesn't need to be in the special deal, although arguably the how and when the community garden is actually implemented could be and certainly could be added in that context, but we first need to get the CDP and the basics done, the CEQA completed, and everything with that.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, because we do list out some of the other CIP projects that are priorities. We will definitely add that to the work plan so that it's clear to everybody that that's a priority. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you for clarifying that. So under economic recovery and development, you know, we've been talking about like new funding sources and economic development, but there's this 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is the Hyatt Place Hotel. And I kind of ask about that, and it's going to be before the Planning Commission next month, and it's going to be the month after that. So why is this being, delayed? That's a good question. And why is it not on the list?
It certainly could be added to the list. It is a priority. I think at the time we started developing this, we had hoped that it would find its way to the Planning Commission during this fiscal year. At this point, we're looking at early in next fiscal year. We are working very closely with the applicant to resolve the issues and the feedback that came from all the environmental work that happened a couple of years ago. And of course, the different projects that have been eating up a lot of the Planning Commission's time obviously have not left room on some of the more recent commission meetings to schedule this, but it is prioritized and it will come forward in the next couple of months, yeah.
Excuse me. I think the downtown plan is going to largely be energized by Carter Park and the programming that's there on one end, and then at the other end of Main Street, the Hyatt Hotel, which, the developer had aimed to, provide some like bike facilities for the continuation of the, the trails system that Post and Midpen are working on. And then there's the Johnston House. The Johnston House being a really untapped, resource for the city in terms of, recreation and programming and tourism development. So, I think we need to, if we're really serious, and then the signage is, the arch is missing, signage, downtown signage, which we go over every single year too. So, I'm glad we're looking at economic development, but we need to look at the things that are going to generate, real revenue and real potential rather than, hoping that the people we help at the Opportunity Center get jobs here and fund our local economy. That's important too, but, we're leaving out the, the revenue generating pieces as far as, and those pieces that support, revenue generation.
Agreed. I will point out under 2C, downtown Highway 92 wayfinding signage, that is the archway. We can clarify that so that it's not confusing for anybody looking for the archway piece. And we are actively working on that right now. We actually have a community member that wants to help fund it, which makes it really easy to prioritize that right now. So we'll make that clarification. And we're happy to add the Hyatt Place project under economic recovery and development, again, so it's clear that it's a priority. But from a staffing perspective, it's been prioritized, and staff is working very closely on a very regular basis with the applicant to get it finalized.
Okay. So under transportation, circulation, and mobility, let's see, I had a couple of questions. So I was driving around, mostly downtown, I was looking at the intersection of, Arnold Way, just checking up on that. But, as I drove down Main Street and Kelly and some of the other streets, it seems like so many of the crosswalks are faded, or in some parts of them, totally chipped away. And even the center line, like on Kelly, is missing stripe in some places. And it seems to me that's not just part of transportation, circulation, and mobility, but also, pedestrian and bike and vehicle safety. How much does it cost really to get out there with some yellow paint and keep those things fresh and clean and sharp? It seems to me to be a real safety issue. And it seems to me like you'd like to answer that question.
I would. Thank you.
Thanks, Maz.
Maz Virginia, Public Works Director. We're actually working on a maintenance project to take care of some of those highly utilized crosswalks. There's a little bit of a balance there because a lot of times you want to do, especially with thermoplastic applications that last longer, you want to make sure you do it after you have a nice road surface. Otherwise, it doesn't really stick very well. So we're in the process of doing some refreshing of some of our crosswalks and our center lines. And as we go and do our street maintenance and preventative maintenance work, we'll also follow up with thermoplastic. So although it's not listed as a priority, it is one of our main areas of importance from a safety perspective as well. So we can always add it. We're going to be working on it. So I think that's totally applicable to put that into the priorities plan as well.
Because the downtown area specifically, has a really significant component of safe routes to school, right? Because we have Seacrest, we have Cunha, we have Hatch, then the adult school. So in this area, adequate intersection safety and striping and crosswalks, I think, are really important from a safe routes to school perspective. So I don't want us to, lose sight of that.
Can I ask, while we have Maz up, so I understand Councilmember Ruddock's point about can they be touched up? And I'm wondering, I know all of our new improvements are the thermoplastic, which is not paint, it's like a plastic that gets melted onto the pavement and lasts much longer. Do we have some that are painted that could be touched up, or is it really, are we past that point with most of these?
It's a combination of the two. So the ones that are painted, we will likely go back and paint them again. Once we do a new surface, then that would be the appropriate time to do the thermoplastic. For the ones that are chipped that are already thermoplastic, we will be going back and doing more thermoplastic on top. It does. You cannot paint on top of the thermoplastic. It doesn't bind well. But you can add thermoplastic on top of existing thermo. Okay. So our effort will be to restore those areas. The crosswalks and the center lines in the downtown, as well as around schools throughout the city, will be our primary focus. And our goal is to get all of that wrapped up by the end of July, prior to school starting. So that's something that we're working on currently as we speak.
Okay. That makes me feel really good. And then you've assured me already today that the Kelly intersection improvements are in there. I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention, so it's at our CCAG meeting last Thursday, we approved the draft, what they call the local area roads and streets safety program. And so there are several cities in the peninsula that have street and road safety plans, but there are like about 9, I think, that did not, and Half Moon Bay was one of those. And so CCAG staff, working with our staff, and getting some public input, created a plan for us. And I see it mentioned, so that's good. It would be helpful to do some initial work. But what I'd like to see is, a follow-up where this is presented to the city council, or maybe it's a workshop for the public, to see the information that's contained in the plan, because I think over time that's going to form the basis of a work plan. And it's interesting, the traffic data, the collision data, the sort of pedestrian versus vehicular. I think that would be really helpful for the public to see, maybe put it on our website. But I think it's really interesting, and I want to thank staff for participating in that and exercising leadership and the content of that. So I think that's really good.
If I may add on that as well. So yes, the CCAG did adopt something that covers the entire county.
Yeah.
And we did work with them a little bit on that. We weren't quite sure about the timing. So at the same time, we applied and we're going to be doing our own local road safety plan as well. We have funding from the US DOT, Department of Transportation. And so I'm happy to bring back the CCAG version, and then also we can look at kicking off our process once we get going on our more, it'll be more specific to our city needs, and we'll look more closely at the local streets than the CCAG did, which was more about looking at the larger collector streets and roads. So I'm happy to bring that back from the CCAG perspective, as well as a kickoff for our own local streets road master plan.
Yeah, I think it's really
Thank you,
important.
Morris. Great, and I guess just one last piece, because Councilmember Ruddick alluded to it through some conversations we had over the last several weeks and right through Father's Day weekend, which I hope didn't interrupt too many Father's Days. Our staff, both from Public Works and from our Community and Economic Vitality team, put together a grant application for over $10 million for design, planning, and construction on improvements at Kelly Avenue and Highway 1. This has obviously been a really, really big issue for a long time. We have applied for grants in the past and not gotten them, but we believe that based on a lot of the things that have been happening in our community and the work that Caltrans is doing on Highway 1, that we're in a better position right now to compete for this, and it'll address many of the concerns that we've heard about the pork chops and safety for kids crossing the highways, and it's such a critical intersection, and I just wanted to recognize and applaud staff for proactively going after that grant and really going above and beyond to make sure it got submitted in a way that makes us competitive, and thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you for the reminder. And yeah, it's not just the intersection, it's looking at the entire stretch of Kelly Avenue all the way to from the beach all the way to downtown. So looking at completing sidewalk gaps, bicycle improvements, as well as the intersection at Highway 1. Thank you for that reminder, Matthew.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
When I saw this work plan, I was amazed. I told Matthew I didn't think it was practical. He claims otherwise. I hope he's right. But just to add more incentive here, there are two items that I think are extremely important, and I wanted to highlight them. One is what we were just talking about, the Highway 1 safety. Redondo Beach Road intersection is really important from a safety standpoint. Marauder Road, although it's not completely in the city, that's something that we could work with Caltrans. So I believe that public safety is probably the most important thing that we are responsible for as a council. And I would make sure that that gets as much attention and priority and grant seeking as we possibly could. The other item that's important to me is also mentioned, and that's the Kehoe ditch, whatever, the water course, the watershed, that stormwater issue about trying to get some more grants to discover how we can best manage that whole stormwater issue. It's mentioned that the citywide effort is part of that, but specifically, if we can attack the source of the water east of Highway 1, that would be an enormous benefit. It would help there in Kehoe. Seymour is another place where we need to really work on stormwater. And I understand that there's not really a lot of money in the existing budget, but that doesn't mean we can't really go out and try to get as much as we can support from the feds, from the state, from the county to address those issues, because they're really important to the city. So those are my two priorities that I wanted to highlight. Thanks.
So CCAG, through its, emerging new strategic plan, or its first strategic plan, is kicking up stormwater in priority. And the proposal is that it takes a watershed approach. So if in our own work here in the city, if we can take a watershed approach, we'll be positioning ourselves in alignment with CCAG, which will be a major, funding channel to access both state, federal, and county funds. So, we might identify our priority watersheds. Certainly Kehoe is one because of the sewer plant and the housing and stuff like that. But so the stars are starting to get aligned there.
Councilmember.
Yeah. I've got a couple of comments. The Hilltop Mobile Home Park. Why the heck has the owner not make sure that's happened? What's holding it up? I'm really tired of him, and I'm tired of him not making this happen.
I think probably we'd be best to formulate a response and bring that back to you with more detail. I do know that staff has worked closely with them, and it has taken longer than we had hoped. But as you can see, there's work that's happened recently that we hope finalizes the project and gets completed. There are some complicating factors related to some of the surrounding properties that make this more challenging than originally thought. So that may have something to do with it, but
Yeah, no, I know. I'm sure staff has been working very hard on it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they've had to work hard on it.
True.
The next is the Bay City Flower Site.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we hear over and over ever since we first started investigating the purchase of that site by the county is that it's long-term planning. We can't even look at that. It's a 10-year, it's a 20-year. I am really not interested in hearing that. Bay City Flower Site is a site. We own some of that site. We need sites for affordable housing. I don't care what the overall plan for the site is. If we can look at that in terms of what the city owns and get the county to cooperate with us and develop affordable housing there, that can be a first step toward an overall plan for that site. I know it's 40 acres. It's huge. 50 acres. Okay, it's huge. But we do own some of it. And we are desperately in need of housing. So I'd like to see us working on that, not thinking in terms of a 10, 20, 30-year timeline for it.
I want to make one clarification. When you say own it, you mean it's within the city's jurisdiction?
Yeah.
Okay. I just,
Yeah.
If someone's listening at home and isn't familiar, they might think we actually own the land. So,
Right.
and just to clarify with folks, the former Bay City Flowers site, as Councilmember Penrose has shared, is mostly within the unincorporated area, but there's 100 feet of frontage along Highway 1 that is within the city limits and within our jurisdiction. What I can share is the county's worked really closely with staff on some of their analysis and due diligence, and it appears that they are looking at more of a phased approach so that they can move some of the plans forward more quickly. I do think that some of your comments about how they approach it probably need to be addressed at a elected to elected level.
Perhaps.
Because those are policy decisions about how quickly they approach these things. But certainly we can relay that information at the staff level so that they can push that forward as well.
Yeah, and when they talk about phases, are they talking about phase 1 including housing?
You know, they don't get that specific yet, but I think it's clear from our discussions with them that they're not planning to go in and do one giant development all at once, that they're looking at different ways of using the property for housing and other purposes, and how do you lay that out in a way that you can incrementally build the site up. So
they're looking at an overall plan.
They are,
And
yes.
my point is, we don't have time to wait for an overall plan. If we have jurisdiction over 100 feet from the highway, maybe we could put housing in that 100 feet that borders the highway. And maybe that's what we ought to be pushing for. you know, we need it. Okay, enough said.
We're happy to relay that message when we work with staff, but certainly what you're talking about, again, is very much policy level, and I think is an elected to elected conversation.
Yes, gotcha. I will talk to as many elected as I can get my voice heard by.
I'll also remind you that the county has not finished their acquisition of the property yet, so
No,
they're
that's
still
supposed to
in their,
happen in July.
I think so. They're
Yeah.
still doing due diligence and hoping to finalize that soon. So
Right. The next thing is minimum wage and the ongoing work that apparently we are doing to understand the impact of increasing the minimum wage on public programs of aid to people that are underserved.
Correct.
And I want to know where we are with that and when we can begin to look at the issue and pass a resolution to increase the minimum wage.
I will say that the discussion about impacts on public benefits, we're not getting a lot of information on that. At the recent League of California Cities efforts up in Sacramento, where our staff was able to meet with some of our elected officials, this concept really perked up their interest, and there was discussion about having the Legislative Analyst Office, which is a nonpartisan group that provides data and information to our legislators, look at it more closely. But I don't think there's going to be a quick answer to that. There is additional work that our city attorney's office has looked at around different categories. We've seen the state start to do minimum wages for different categories. And I think that's the information we'll bring forward next and probably can bring forward in the next month or two for discussion. You know, what our options are for maybe just focusing on different categories of workers that may not be impacted by these public benefit concerns. So that is the direction we're headed right now. And like I said, I think we can bring it forward in the next couple of months.
Okay, I understand that. My own personal feeling about it is that on reflection, if we say that people are going to be prevented from getting public aid because they make too much money, then we'll never have anybody with a livable wage, that it's not maybe the best argument. So I'm beginning to feel that more, so that's why I care about it.
Understood. Thank you.
Let's see, I've got, stop it. Okay, I think that was it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
As an aside, just to give you some more information, the county just agreed that the county worker minimum wage is going to be $30 an hour, and they get lots of good benefits. They did an analysis of how much it takes to live in San Mateo County for a husband and wife, a family of two, and they concluded that it takes at least $30 an hour to live at all in San Mateo County. So that's a piece of information which should be factored into this discussion.
Thank you. Any more comments? No? All right, my turn. Thank you. About Bay City, you know, I know it's elected to elected officials. Would there be a possibility for us to make an invitation, maybe a county manager or county supervisors to meet with us, you know, to have a combined a meeting like a town hall so we can talk about the site, about, you know, what's in their mind, what is the process, how long is gonna, you know, what's planned for the site.
So you're talking an open community meeting?
Pretty much.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's certainly something we can request from the county. My suspicion is they won't do it until they complete the acquisition. But it's certainly something that we would do and I would hope that they'd be open to it as well. So I'm happy to make that request through the county executive and see if we can start that process moving forward if they agree to it.
Thank you. My other comment, it's related to transportation, circulation, mobility, about Highway 1 safety. I was on my walk yesterday, Kelly Avenue. There was a parent with a stroller. The length of the stroller, probably close to, between 4 and 5 feet. And and I looked on the highway, and still there's no signage, going north on Highway 1 before you turn on Kelly, about slowing down for pedestrians. And her fear, she showed me, like, I'm not able to go into the pork shop to press the button so I can actually, for the crosswalk. I mean, it was obvious, that the danger that, the fear that she has. She's a resident of Alsace Lorraine, and just like her, some of her neighbors have the same fear about the visibility, even though the hedgerows have been trimmed down. Now there's more visibility, but there's no signage. If you stand on the sidewalk, east of the light, you're not visible. So we need to go, I don't know how many feet south from the light to make sure there's signage. There's the pedestrian, crosswalk. Just to make it safe. And again, the intersections along Highway 1, looking into, Caltrans doing the work on Highway 1, and just looking into different intersections, about how more visibility, looking about no stoplights, in those intersections. I know it's been, I know it was brought up at one of the planning commission meetings about looking into some of the intersections, and it's for safety. But right now, I think, Kelly, he's a priority, to do the signage, as soon as possible. So we can do that, and other than that, as great work.
Thank you. And I'll just share, Maz and I have been meeting, about every 6 weeks with Caltrans. It started on the 92 project, and we got these big meetings with the county and state reps. Now that project is wrapped up, it's shifted to Highway 1. The focus for us has been the stretch by Surfers Beach, where there's damage to the coastal trail and things being undermined. But we'll add this to the list because this is their maintenance team that we're meeting with. And I think the hope would be that the signage can be treated as maintenance. We know they've got bigger plans with their project, but that's not going to happen immediately, and maybe we can convince them that adding some signage here ahead of that project is worthwhile. So, and the county's in those meetings, and sometimes we get state reps there as well. So I think we'll have support. Thank you.
Thank you. We need
We have one online speaker.
Oh.
One comment online.
Thank you.
Carlisle, go ahead.
Thank you, Jessica. Long ago, when Bob Nisbet was still the city manager, and you guys were voting to approve the land use update plan, I brought up emergency evacuation, and he said that was going to be part of the circulation element. And now fire season is starting early this year, as you might have noticed in the news. And we all know about all the multiple accidents on Highway 1 and 92. So at that time, he said it was going to be part of the circulation element, and it was coming. But the only one I can find online is 2013, and the emergency evacuation part is kind of thin. So with more density coming, we can expect more traffic, I'm imagining, and more gridlock. So is there anything coming soon that you guys have highlighted for emergency evacuation for the whole entire coast side, not just your city, by any chance?
Can you answer that?
Sure, I'd happy to, and thank you for that question. And yes, you're correct about the plan at the time that Bob was here. What we found at the time, as we started looking at doing evacuation planning at the city level, was essentially what you just shared is it has to be looked at a regional level. We cannot just plan to evacuate Half Moon Bay. We have to do that planning with our partners on all sides of us in the unincorporated areas. And even more importantly, the fire district and the sheriff's office have really, really important roles, as does the Department of Emergency Management. There actually is, and it's in the work plan, a project that is being, I think, and John Dowdy can share details. I think they're doing an RFP right now for a consultant to lead a countywide effort to do evacuation planning, and of course a subset of that will be bringing together all the different groups on the coast side this fiscal year to look at coast side evacuation planning. So that is in the works. John, any
I'll
other
go
details?
one step further. Contract is awarded, we've kicked off, and we are meeting as we speak on the countywide evacuation plan work.
Thank you. I'm so relieved to hear that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just want to say that the pace that this thing has been progressing is abysmal and, really unpardonable. It's been years that we've been talking about this. It's coming, the communications plan, and, we got bupkis, basically. So this is a serious priority that's not really, it doesn't seem like a priority. So I'm hoping this year is different.
Those are fair comments, and it's been frustrating. I will share that when the county pulled the Office of Emergency Services out of the sheriff's office, brought it into the county executive's office and created the Department of Emergency Management, they spent at least 3 years trying to find the right leadership for that group. They've hired a permanent director. She's been on board for about a year, a brilliant woman that worked in public health for many, many years. She's a PhD. And John can probably speak because he works so closely with them. Everything has changed over there, and we actually have some confidence in this effort. And I think what John just shared is part of that demonstration, because they talked about that RFP for years and it never went anywhere. And now they have a contract on board and the work has already started. So it doesn't pardon the fact that work hadn't been done over the years, and we have a role in that. But we do think that it's important for us to participate on this regional effort, because any work we do individually is not going to be effective without our regional partners. So.
Agree. I just see, all those groves of eucalyptus up in the mid-coast, and I think, we're not immune from the impacts of that. And I just see the county dragging their feet. I know the city's been interested, but.
Yeah.
If I could just add a little bit, just to, I think good information, good news. Measure K included funding for CERT, for the Coastside CERT program. I'm not sure if everybody was aware of it. I think Cynthia's done a good job of letting folks know. And then also Measure K also provided funding for a new Coastside staffer. So we also have now with the Measure K funding, and they're in the process of recruiting that position. David will still remain, I think, a big part of this community and big part of the Coastside, but it's unclear a little bit of how that relationship, but that I think is a critical piece to the DIM, the Department of Emergency Management. And yes, it's taken a long while for them to kind of come up to speed. I'm thrilled with it. It's been a painful process for all of us. I think we're on the right track, and I think we'll see some significant movement finally on many of these items.
Councilor Brunson.
I just want to comment that Supervisor Ray Mueller has office hours out here, right on the coast, and he shows up. Any of us could go there anytime and ask him some of these questions about what's going on with the county and more, things that aren't moving, things that are moving, whether it's Space Cities, whether it's emergency services. That's why he has an office out here. So I want to mention that to any of us as citizens, council members, and anybody listening. And we have the press here, could put that out there, that if you want to know what's going on with the county and things that they are or are not moving on and what they're thinking about, by all means, that's why he set up an office out here. So, and he's more than happy to speak to people and follows up with folks. So I think he's very responsive. Thanks.
Ready to move forward? Well, make a motion.
We had to accept by motion. So I move that we receive and accept the report on the proposed staff work plan for the City Council priorities for fiscal years 2024 through 26.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Brownstone,
Yes.
Councilmember Penrose,
Yes.
Councilmember Reddick,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rarback,
Yes.
and Mayor Jimenez.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could just, I heard enough feedback tonight that I do think there are some revisions that need to be made to this. So we'll make those revisions before we publish this to the website, and I'll let you all know when those are done, and you can take a look at it, and we can tweak it as needed going forward. The only other thing I wanted to share, you as council members clearly know this, but for the community to know, the priorities work plan is a really, really important part of the work we do that guides our efforts. But it's only a portion of the services and the efforts that city staff and the city council provide to the community. And not all of our staff members are reflected in this work plan. So I just wanted to take a moment to recognize the fact that we have staff that are out there every day maintaining our parks, maintaining our roads and our sidewalks, cleaning our beaches. We have staff that are working behind the scenes, making sure that payroll is taken care of. And, when people have to pay bills to the city, those are taken care of. We have our clerk's office who obviously makes all of these meetings happen. They also have a huge lift every other year with the election. They're responsible for administering the election here locally. And that is a huge lift for them as part of their normal workload. And so for the community's benefit, just know that what you see here is a portion of what the city provides, and it's pretty substantial and exciting work, but there's a lot that happens day to day that our staff are out there doing to make this community great. And I loved, it was great to hear the support for a potential tax measure, but I was really, really heartened by the feedback we got from the community about the work that we're all doing together, that people are recognizing that this is a great community and the city is a big part of that. And that goes down from the council all the way down to all of our staff members. So thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, all staff. Item 3E.
Thank you, Council. We're welcoming Ken Stiles, our Finance Manager, and he's joined by Maz Bozergini, our Public Works Director. I will begin the presentation tonight and then turn it over to Ken, and Maz is really here to answer questions. He'll provide a little bit of information about the CIP, but he presented on that recently, so he's more here to answer questions about specific capital projects. Next slide, please, Ken. It's okay. So tonight we are presenting for your review and consideration the proposed budget for fiscal year 2024-25. There's a timeline in front of you. This isn't something that happens overnight. We begin work on this almost immediately following the new calendar year, simultaneously while working through the current year's budget. I think what's of note this year is typically in June we bring the budget forward, the draft budget book forward at the beginning of June, and it gives the community and council a chance to review it, have a discussion about it, and then we bring it back at the second meeting in June for approval, because we have to approve the budget before July 1st so that we can enter into the new budget year. Luckily, there was a little bit of foresight, not even knowing what was about to happen in our community. And in May, we did do a workshop because of the financial challenges we've been facing. We thought it'd be important to bring it forward earlier for more discussion, more policy direction, more feedback. And then, of course, we canceled the June 4th meeting so that we could honor and recognize our mayor's son and his passing and the services around that. Where that's left us, of course, is tonight is the only night on a regular council meeting that is scheduled to consider the budget. Ideally, we'd be able to work through any questions and approve the budget tonight, but We could schedule a special meeting or add this to, we have a special meeting next week. It could be added to approve this budget if the feedback we get tonight requires us to do additional work on the budget. So I just want to put that out there that not required to approve the budget tonight. I think obviously that'd be preferred just from a workload standpoint, but it really depends on your perspective as you go through the budget with us tonight. Next slide, please. I just wanted to provide a little context. I think Jessica did a pretty good job of that earlier tonight, but I don't think we can overemphasize kind of how we got here, because a $4 million structural deficit is significant for us. It represents about 20% of our operating budget, and is not easily overcome by making just a few minor tweaks or changes or cutting back here and there. It really requires some pretty big action by the city and the council. So I just want to talk about how we got here and again, the work that we're doing to get through this. So first and foremost, as was mentioned earlier tonight by some of you and by Jessica, our deficit is based on some things that were outside of our control and unexpected. Going back before the pandemic, and even as we started to come out of the pandemic, as a city, we've had a really healthy budget. Typically ending the year with $1 million plus in additional funding. And through your prudence and leadership of past city managers, we've been really thoughtful about putting that money into reserves and using that money to fund important projects. I think the most forward-thinking thing that was done in recent history was the creation of the Economic Uncertainty Fund, which was a separate reserve from our operating reserve in order to help the city manage through challenging times like we're facing today. That was established in 2019 as 20% of our operating budget to go on top of the 30% that is in our regular operating reserves. As we came out of the pandemic, we had high hopes. 2021-22 was a promising year. Our hotel TOT rebounded and actually came back very strong. And the prognosis for the future was great. We had worked through some issues with the sheriff's office, and we were hopeful for continuing to maintain our finances in the future. 23-24, we were blindsided by what was shared earlier. Our public safety costs, which is our share of costs, our 911 expenditures and others, in 23-24 went up 41% or 43% from the previous year. And now over 2 years, we're at over 51% increase over those prior years. Public safety is, when you look at our department budgets, it is our #1 expenditure. We spend more on public safety, and it's not uncommon for a city, especially a city of our size, for public safety costs to be one of the primary expenditures, because there's certain economies of scale we can't take advantage of. Public safety is expensive, and obviously it's a crucial, vital service to provide to the community. So public safety costs increased dramatically over the last 2 years. We also saw some of the highest inflation in recent history throughout the country, which impacts the costs of the services that we receive, the products that we purchase to provide those services, and the contracts that we have. And this has really created a structural issue from an expenditure standpoint at the same time that revenues have changed. As I mentioned before, TOT appeared to have a strong rebound coming out of the pandemic in 22-23. As we've talked about before, it was clear now that that was pent-up demand for travel, and we became a really desired destination because you didn't have to get on a plane necessarily. You could get in your car, you could come here, you could enjoy the outdoor spaces and still feel safe as you were managing your way out of the pandemic. That was a bubble. It has ended, and travel to coastal towns throughout California is down statewide. And unfortunately, a lot of the travelers that were coming here, it appears, are traveling overseas, but we're not getting overseas travel in return, which has really been a big issue for our local hotels. TOT has actually gone down 6% over the last 2 years. At the same time, our property tax has flattened out, and sales tax as well. And so you take the combination of massively increasing costs to provide services, especially unexpected costs, with revenues that have been reduced beyond what we could have ever predicted or expected. We've continued to reduce our expectations on TOT and property tax and sales tax revenues until we see an actual rebound of those revenue sources. Next slide, please. So again, this is just to put those numbers in more detail. Again, over the last 2 years, we've had a 51% increase in public safety costs, which amounts to $2.4 million. So when we're talking about a $4 million deficit, more than half of it is directly attributed to these increased public safety costs. And without drastic changes to services, those costs will continue to go up and not go down, although at this point, we're expecting them to only go up based on their natural increases to labor contracts and inflation. Just to show some of the inflation across the board, historically 3% has been where inflation is averaged for goods and services, and over the last couple of years, we've had an over 10% increase due to inflation, which again is pretty unprecedented for our time. Obviously, and historically, there's been much larger increases in inflation, but the cost of doing business for everybody, the city, our small businesses, and the cost to buy goods for residents has gone up, and that has affected our ability to provide services. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm happy to take questions on that before we move into the rest of the presentation. Otherwise, I'll turn the time over to Ken. Okay, looks like we'll turn the time to Ken. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. So I'm going to be running through the recommended budget for 24-25. Most of these numbers are very similar to what you saw back in May. There's a small adjustments in the expenditures, but it's relatively the same budget. This is our revenues, our top three separated out. TOT, we're estimating 8.6 next year, essentially flat. As Matthew mentioned, our TOT decreased in the past few years, and this is the new baseline that we're working with. It's not entirely convincing that we're out of the woods, but we're hopeful that it will. This is the bottom. Property taxes is at 3.84, which is about a 3% increase from last year or this current year, and this is only from base property taxes. So one thing to note in this line item is that, as you may know, the state also has a deficit. The last number I saw was $27 billion. And what that means for cities is that state reimbursements are questionable. Lucky for us, we don't have that many, and it's not really affecting us materially, but we do receive something called a vehicle in lieu tax, vehicle in lieu fee, VLF. And historically, for the past few years, there's been a shortfall, but the state reimburses it. Going into next year, we're assuming that we won't get that reimbursement, and that's roughly about $300K. So it's a chunk of money, but it's not material for us. Sales and use taxes, 3.2, relatively flat. Other revenues at 4.9, about $500,000 increase. This is from a increase in our credit for our pension from our sheriff contract, and a little bit extra for building permits. Overall, total revenues 21.1, or about $650K increase, or 3%. Onto the expenditure side, total payrolls at 7.2, about 90,000 increase, or 1%. We only had one increase, which is our contractual obligations that come through our labor agreements, COLAs. We do have a couple of scale backs to reduce that increase. We froze one vacant position that gave us a savings of about 120, and then we shifted a portion of staff time to applicable grants. What is not included in these numbers is that we're going to be holding some vacancies open as they occur throughout the year to give us, we're not going to automatically fill them, to give us time to actually evaluate and potentially reallocate duties to existing staff. Overall, there's no additional positions or part-time staff. Supplies and contract services, 12.9, about $100,000 decrease. Unfortunately, the biggest chunk in this increase are more non-discretionary items, public safety, as mentioned. Operationally, the things that we can change, we were able to reduce by about 10% average, or about $500,000 across all the departments. Some of those cuts include removing one city location and consolidating staff to City Hall, the CARES grant being defunded after grant expiration, and anything that's been over budgeted or things that we can just pull back on. Other operating expenditures, $950, that's for our library loan and for 880 Stone Pine. The number may come down if we sell a portion of the Stone Pine parcel back to the county. But we built in $950, which is the full amount. Pension, 1.3. This has increased. This is a number that's given to us from CalPERS, and it's just based on the investment gains of CalPERS. When they have good years, the number comes down. When the market doesn't do too great, it goes up. But our 5-year average with this number is about $1 million. Internal service transfers, so these are things like our risk management fund, our vehicle, our IT, that's going up by about $70K. Overall, our total operating expenditures are $23 million, increased by about $700,000. With that, I'll pass it on to Maz to discuss CIP.
Thank you, Ken. I just wanted to give a brief recap on our capital improvement program, as it is a big component of our budget. Our CIP, since our last meeting, went to the Planning Commission on June 11th, where they made the determination of finding for consistency with respect to our general plan and our local coastal plan. There were some comments, and we had a good conversation with regards to programs versus projects. I won't go into those details. If you have questions, I'm happy to go into them a little bit more. There's also some modifications to the document. For example, the Highway 1 South Corridor study. It's there's a typo. It's still shown under the trails. Financially, it's not going to change, but we will be shifting that over before we publish that CIP document into the streets section of that CIP document. So we'll make sure we make that revision. Overall, we've also really prioritized grant applications, as Matthew mentioned earlier, the Kelly Avenue Complete Street Project and intersection at Highway 1. And we're really going to be looking at funding a lot of our capital program and projects through grant opportunities. So we'll be continuing to seek those quite a bit. Overall, the general fund contribution that we're requesting currently is 1.7 million. And we have our estimated expenditure of 18 million based on a lot of the special revenues, some of the grants that we have, as well as some of our sewer funds for some other projects. So again, just wanted to give a quick high-level overview of our CIP and what's happened since the last time we were here. And I'm happy to answer any questions with respect to any of the programs or projects.
All right. So this is our fiscal year 2024-2025 general fund budget summarized. We have revenues at 21 million, operating expenditures at 23.3, and capital at 1.7. And that gives us to a deficit for next year at 4 million. Now, at the last council meeting in May, we had presented council with some options to fill in this gap, and the two that kind of risen to the top was using the general fund unassigned balances. And unassigned fund balances are just monies that accrue when we don't spend our entire budget in prior years. So we're anticipating for this budget, for this fiscal year that we're in, that's going to end soon in the next few weeks, that we're going to come in under budget by about 1.6. We are recommending to use a portion of that towards next year's budget. In addition to that, the remainder, 2.4, we're recommending using the Economic Uncertainty Reserve. One of the allowed uses of the reserve was to prevent service level impacts. And we feel that at this point that if we were to scale back, that would have more service level implications. With that, applying those two funds, we come to a balanced budget technically, but it should be stressed that while next year we would fill that gap, it ultimately is not sustainable. So what does that mean with our reserves? On the left-hand side, you see how we think we're going to end the year, any estimate for 23-24, and if the council were to approve this budget as is, what our reserves will look like this time next year. And we will have unassigned funds would be 0, would have used all of it, and then the reserves would be at 8.6 million or 37%. Now, our reserve policy is 50% of our operating expenditures. The best practice is 16, but our council was prudent to adopt a policy to have it at 50, and it's coming to use for next year if this budget were to be approved. Ultimately, though, this deficit is structural. It is currently at 4 million if nothing structurally changes as far as revenues or expenditures. The longer term options that were discussed in May and throughout the year with the Finance Committee and was discussed earlier tonight. The first one being the sales and use tax increase. If council were to go into this direction, that would generate about 2 million, and it would generate about 2 million, and the increase would be about 0.5, which is about half a penny per the dollar. Additionally, investing in tourism and investing in economic development efforts, trying to get people back to the coast.
And Ken, if I could just jump in on that, just to remind council, we had the hotel BID item earlier tonight, and that will come forward in July, hopefully for final approval. What that will do is it will double the budget for the BID, and for the community to know, that's not a tax that they pay. It's an assessment that is paid when people spend a night in one of our hotels, and the hotels basically impose that, and then that money goes to their group, which is managed by the Chamber of Commerce, to market tourism and visitors to the coast side to help drive revenues at the hotels and ultimately TOT to the city. Additionally, we make an annual contribution to the hotel BID, and the ask this year that was approved by council was to fund a visitor study. So as the BID has additional revenues to come in to spend on marketing and really tourism-based marketing, the timing's perfect to do this visitor study to understand who visits and what their spending patterns are and how we can better attract visitors to come and not just come to our beach and leave, but to spend the night, to pay TOT, to spend money in our restaurants and our small businesses, which will stimulate the economy and generate additional tax revenues to the city. And again, working on other economic development efforts, which were mentioned in the work plan tonight. And as was pointed out by Councilmember Ruddick, one of the keys would be for if the Hyatt project could move forward, that's an additional hotel that could bring in some significant additional TOT revenue to the city. So the idea is the sales tax is not the be-all, end-all. It makes a significant difference, especially towards the costs that have increased for public safety, but there's additional work that needs to be done to help us recover the economy, drive tourism, and bring back our TOT and sales tax revenues to the community.
If the sales tax passes, when would we see the increase in revenue?
So For this fiscal year, we'd have about a half year of revenues because the sales tax would take effect January 1st. Is that correct? So in this coming fiscal year, there's a chance that we would, at mid-year, if the tax passes and things move forward, at mid-year, we'd actually make an adjustment to the budget with this new revenue of probably about $1 million of additional revenue in this fiscal year. And I think our recommendation would be to put that revenue back into the Economic Uncertainty Fund and try to get that built back up as quickly as possible, because it is an important part of our financial solvency in the future. And then, of course, going forward, those revenues would just be part of the annual budget. Sorry, Ken, I interrupted you.
No, that was it. And the recommendation is on the screen, but I understand that potentially this might be a special meeting, but if council were to approve, the recommendations are establish the GAN appropriation limit for fiscal year 24-25, approve the city's review of the investment policy, there's been no changes, and then adopt the fiscal year 24-25 annual operating and capital budget. And I will take any questions.
Questions?
And I actually have one little point to make regarding a conflict issue. It didn't come up, I don't believe, highlighted in the presentation, but this budget does include a special fund. It's Fund 135 for the Opportunity Center of the Coast Side, and I wanted to just mention that I discussed with the mayor earlier this evening that he plans to recuse if there is any specific discussion on that fund. However, if the council doesn't have any proposed changes to the proposed budget with respect to that fund, Councilmember Jimenez can continue to participate. So I just wanted to flag that. There's segmentation procedures for budgets very similar to actually what you all did during the land use plan update. But it only would come into play if there is a desire amongst the four council members without a conflict to have any discussion regarding that specific fund. Thank you.
I just want to make the point that I've heard that staff is a little uncertain or nervous about layoffs. And as Ken has pointed out, there are no layoffs in this next fiscal year. So I think our staff is doing a hell of a job, and they should feel confident that their livelihood, at least for the next fiscal year, is assured. So thanks for that.
I just had a point of discussion, and that was, and I discussed this with Catherine, you know, we have a very large legal budget, and it's necessary given what we have going on. But we've been having a lawyer at all of our planning commission meetings, and maybe we could, you know, fix that process in that maybe she's not there at every planning commission meeting, but there's some process by which the chair and the community development director talk. If there's an item they feel that, you know, heavy-duty legal help is needed, you know, they could bring somebody in, but, you know, we could save, it's not a lot of money, but, you know, around $25,000 by just changing our policy about having an attorney, you know, at planning commission meetings and just handling that differently. Small, but, you know, one thing that just might help given our legal budget is going up. So that's not to say never do it, but, you know, do it more sparingly and only for those issues where, you know, there's some serious legal principle, you know, being raised, something like that.
Do we need to do a
We have one
public comment?
speaker, yeah.
Sorry, I saw that screen.
Carlisle, go ahead.
I can't see your audience. I guess I'm the only one with questions. I wanted to know if you guys thought of doing a visitor survey asking about reasons they might not be coming to Half Moon Bay as much as they used to. For instance, you know, we did have the mass murder, we do have really bad traffic. And do you think that those kind of things have deterred people from coming? Or is that just something the chamber might look into? That's all I wanted to say.
You know, I know we've discussed this before, but all the things that Matthew already mentioned about people shifting from staycations to vacationing outside the state, less foreign travelers coming here. And yeah, you know, we've had some storms, we've had sinkholes, we've had some fires, and it's not just impacted us, it's impacted lots of coastal communities. So I think we just have to see how things improve. You know, we could do a survey, I suppose, but I'm not sure. Be interested in Chrislyn wants to speak to that.
Chrislyn. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid. Yeah, we can definitely look into that. I will note, though, we are going to do a really comprehensive data analysis. So a lot of the funding for the visitor survey is going to go towards getting spending data and geo data of our visitors, as well as an on-site people going around and asking questions. We're actually pretty sure why people don't come. Yes, some of the things that have happened in the past are an issue, and actually one of the issues that I don't know if it has been mentioned is the worst rap that San Francisco gets, it trickles down. So we are actively working on marketing plans that kind of separate us from those things, and as a part of the hopeful new BID budget, we will be engaging hopefully a new marketing company that will be able to bring some really fresh new ideas of how we can dissuade some of those unfortunate things.
Chrislyn, correct me if I'm wrong, but we also lost conference, you know, especially at our major hotel. And, you know, we all know the news. There are a lot of layoffs in tech and stuff in terms of local conferences.
So to your point, going into the pandemic, the Ritz reported that 60% of their total annual revenue was from corporate groups doing buyouts and the whole thing. That obviously plummeted. Right as we started to see corporate groups coming back and getting really hopeful about them, the tech world started doing the mass layoffs and then just watched it take a nosedive. So we are very much affected by what the big companies do when it comes to that.
I think increasing our signage will help too.
If you haven't seen, at least the new baby sign went up on 92.
I think it's going to be really important too, so not just getting people to come here, but getting more money out of the people who are here. You know, coming to the beaches, walking around downtown, you need a plan to actually get them to part with their money. You know, so we had talked previously about like tokens or coupons or something like that, but a lot of people are already here. You just got to get them to spend. And, you know, Bob Nisbet said something that rang true for me. This is about 6 months after he was city manager, and he said, the problem with Half Moon Bay is that you haven't embraced being, you know, a visitor serving community. You know, he said, we're a tourist community. We have beaches, we have hotels. You have to embrace it and invest in that and, you know, make the visitor experience like really good. That's what you got to work on. So you mentioned invest in tourism, and that's kind of the, you know, the thing that's a no-brainer to me. So don't know how we do that, but.
Well, and I think that is some of the work that's going to already happen with the work that the chamber is doing is the data that we're going to get isn't just about people traveling and staying in hotels. It's about people shopping on Main Street. It's about people driving past Main Street, straight to the beach, going back. And so I think it supports that, but I think you're correct, is as much as we need to get people here for overnight where we get the big bang for the buck, the crowds are here. And you know, we're seeing them on the weekends already as things warm up. And I think that's where the arch sign comes in, better signage. We've talked about doing some signage at the beaches to remind people like, hey, you don't need to go home right now. You can go and have dinner and let traffic pass and, you know, go shop on Main Street. And hopefully as that type of work moves forward and people see some of the fruits of it, our businesses will be incentivized to stay open later and you know, the music in the downtown can pick up and those types of things and really increase the vibrancy of our downtown, which also benefits the people in our community who want to get out and have some nightlife and enjoy our downtown. We have, I will just say, we have such an incredible downtown, and I think we sometimes take it for granted being here. But I visit other communities, I'm out with my family, and this is a very special downtown, and I can't wait to see it become, you know, meet its potential, because it really is a place that people should spend a lot of time and money.
Yeah, so I have a couple who are friends who live in Novato, but they own a lot of properties like on Piedmont Avenue, and they have ownership of Cafe, what is it, one of the Italian, Trieste, Cafe Trieste. They've made a ton of money, and one of the things that they've done working with business entrepreneurs is recruit restaurants. So you look at your portfolio of restaurants, you know, what are we missing here, and what would really, you know, be a magnet? And they actually hire a recruiter who goes and finds, you know, people who own restaurants. Maybe it's a chain, maybe it's somebody who's been thinking about a restaurant, but that has paid off, according to them, in many cases, especially like in the East Bay. So just one thing to put in your little toolbox is a restaurant recruiter. You know, we could benefit, I think, from more restaurants. We have some great ones, but we could benefit, I think, you know, from some more. So one other thing I wanted to mention was, do we need any contract support for this election coming up? You know, I know it's a ton of work given our own, you know, initiatives, and we have Maggie who's wonderfully supporting. But I'm just wondering, would it be helpful to Jessica to have a little extra support right now?
I can follow up with her. Generally, we've used contract support for the redistricting process because that is just a massive lift and it's very specialized. You know, the elections work is well within their wheelhouse, but I'm certainly happy to have that conversation and we could, you know, look at places. I'll share that what isn't reflected in this budget completely is we've had some staff turnover and we're not immediately filling vacant positions right now. When a position becomes vacant, we're taking a moment to step back and looking at the responsibilities of those vacant positions and deciding, okay, what have they been doing that has been necessary that needs to continue forward? What have they been doing that maybe they've wrapped up some really important projects and maybe their workload was going to shift, and where can we shift some of these responsibilities, and where do some of these responsibilities need contract support? Within some of those vacancies and salary savings, we can, I think, find the money to support additional efforts if necessary around the election or any other specialized projects this year.
Yeah. I think you ought to talk to Jessica about that.
Yes, I'd like to move that we establish the GAN appropriation limit for fiscal year 2024-25, and that we approve the city's investment policy, and third, adopt the fiscal year 2024-25 annual operating and capital budget.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Brownstone,
Yes.
Councilmember Penrose,
Yes.
Councilmember Reddick,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rarback,
Yes.
and Mayor Jimenez.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Council. And this is another place I just have to take a moment. The budget, as I've shared, starts in January and February of each year. it's a huge lift, and especially as we get close to this time of year. Lisa Rossi, who's our Admin Services Director, and her team, we have Ken Stiles, our Finance Manager, and Brian Lopez, who is a Senior Management Analyst that puts the book together, which is a 300-page book he has to build every year. It's a ton of work for them, all their staff, all the department heads, and many of our other staff. Julissa Acosta translates some portions of the book so that our Spanish-speaking community can also have access to this information. It's a huge undertaking. I did it for 3 years at the county and had to sleep at the office sometimes to get it done. So I understand what a huge amount of work it is for them. So I want to take a moment to publicly recognize them for their work, and thank you. All of this in the midst of their team also leading a huge move, because they're moving from the annex to City Hall on Thursday. So, we couldn't have timed that worse, but it's all going to happen, and it's going to save us some money, and I think we're really excited to have everybody, much more of our team under the same roof at City Hall. I think it's going to be an exciting time for the city. So thank you for your support, council, your thoughtful feedback and input, and thanks for approving it tonight, and that allows us to shift our focus on some other efforts, so thank you.
And a quick thank you to our city manager, Matthew Chittister.
Yep. Thank you. Any future items for discussion? Nope. Possible agenda items? No, nothing. City council reports?
So One Shoreline has been working with our Congresswoman and our 2 state senators on getting $2 million into the Army Corps budget to start looking at the SAM treatment plant to adapt the plant to sea level rise. They would be using the integral plan that's already been developed, but looking at some major modifications of potentially the inlet area and a berm around the plant. So they successfully managed to get it in the budget, but the budget hasn't been passed yet, so it's still kind of dicey. But there's $2 million in the budget for the Army Corps to start addressing the sewage treatment plant. So that's cautiously optimistic news.
Okay, I would like to move that we adjourn with a moment of silence, and we do it in the honor of Joaquin's son. Thank you.
Thank you.